Chapter 1584. The bone-chilling cold really pierced into his bones. The guy who had been running all the way didn't even have time to make a sound. He fell into the snow and screamed, rolling on the ground. "Great shaman, spare me, spare me!" In front of him was a particularly eye-catching black temple amidst the white snow. A calm voice came from the temple with a hint of helplessness. "Don't pretend. This little bit of cold power can't take your life." The rolling figure thought for a moment and felt that it was indeed a bit too much. Wasn't this just playing tricks on the great shaman? He was startled and quickly got up. He respectfully said, "Yes. Iron Thread, you have caused a big trouble this time. If you are safe, then that's fine. Otherwise, I'm afraid I will have to kill you with my own hands." The middle-aged man called Iron Thread, who came from an extraordinary background, widened his eyes, a look of confusion on his face. I haven't even seen that person. How did I cause trouble?" The great shaman of Meng Mountain didn't explain further. "Go. Tell her to hurry to the Western Wastelands capital as fast as possible." Space suddenly twisted, wrapping around Iron Thread. He disappeared in a flash. The mountain returned to silence. Only the wind and snow could be heard. Within the Black Temple there was a light sigh. A storm was brewing. He could only hope that His Majesty could smoothly pass. Otherwise, he could only risk his life to block the 13th floor. Min Xiangtai woke up in the morning. He felt extremely sleepy, as if he had been fooling around the entire night. After enduring for a long time, he finally fell asleep on the table with a plop sound. The two maids in the study, the scholar and the chess attendant, also fell to the ground as if they were infected. With a creaking sound, the door was pushed open. Master Min walked in. He was frowning, and his face was full of misfortune. He first walked to the round table and poured himself a cup of tea. After drinking a few mouthfuls, he found that the tea was too hot. He immediately stuck out his tongue and fanned himself with his hands. "I can't even drink tea. I'm so unlucky," Master Min wailed. He turned around and sat to the side, his face filled with disappointment. He raised his head and glanced at a certain book on the bookshelf. He smiled bitterly and said, "Miss, you've been staying in my silly son's study for so many days. Aren't you going to come out and greet me?" A cloud of smoke gushed out, condensing into the figure of a woman. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters. She looked over and bowed. "This little girl has been rude. I hope Master doesn't blame me." Lord Min's eyes lit up, and he quickly covered his eyes with his hands. He swallowed his saliva and said loudly, "Miss, you can wear more clothes. I'm old. I really can't stand this." The woman looked down at her half-naked, snow-white breasts. She suddenly laughed and walked over. "Master is really interesting. It's unexpected. However, I came here without an invitation and disturbed the peace of your palace. Master, please take a few glances. Consider this a small token of my gratitude." Pausing for a moment, she took a few steps forward, leaned forward slightly, and said, "Or, Master, you can touch it." Gulp! There was a clear swallowing sound. Lord Min moved his hand away. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he stared at the soft snow-white breasts in front of him. He endured it for several moments, but he really couldn't hold back any longer. He reached out a trembling hand and placed it on the snow-white breasts. "Ah!" The woman screamed out in pain. Her figure flashed, and she instantly appeared behind the desk. She glared at Lord Min. Her eyes were cold and filled with hatred, but there was also a bit of shock and anger that couldn't be concealed. On her chest, there were several bruises and bruises. When contrasted with the surrounding snow-white breasts, it was even more shocking. Lord Min had a calm expression. He slowly withdrew his hand and looked across at the 9-tailed monster fox that was staring at him. "I am indeed lustful, and I like all sorts of beautiful women. If the young ladies outside my courtyard were to deliver themselves to me on their own initiative like you, I wouldn't be polite. I would grab them and rush into bed. But what I like are people. I have no interest in a coquettish fox like you. I was a bit heavy-handed, just to teach you a lesson. Don't try to flirt in front of me again, otherwise it won't be so simple next time." The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile. "Do you understand?" The nine-tailed monster fox screamed. "Who are you?" "Your ancestor," Lord Min lightly said. The nine-tailed monster fox clenched her teeth. Blood-red light appeared in the depths of her eyes, and a cruel light surged. She wished she could reveal her true form and tear this old man to pieces. But for some unknown reason, she felt a sense of dread and unease in her heart. She looked down at the bruises on her chest and clenched her teeth. Suddenly, she restrained her anger, and a cloud of mist flashed past. Then, she turned into a calm fairy in white clothes. She faintly smiled and respectfully bowed. "Since Master has spoken, I will do as you say." "Smart." Lord Min revealed a smile. "So, remember your incomparably smart choice today. Don't forget it in the future. For the next few days, you must obediently stay in the book and don't go anywhere. Wait for this storm to pass and then leave." Lord Min stood up and revealed a look of disgust. He looked at the hand that had just grabbed her. "I have to go wash it. Otherwise this smell is too unbearable." The nine-tailed monster fox watched him leave. Her face was expressionless, but there was a thoughtful look in her eyes. The fox race had always been known for their intelligence. This was something everyone knew. So that fierce and violent display just now was just an act. Their goal was to probe. But unfortunately, Lord Min hid his strength and didn't reveal even the slightest bit of his aura. Without a doubt, he was a truly wondrous person. Otherwise, did he really think that just anyone could casually grab her and wound the body of a great monster? After thinking about it again and again, the nine-tailed monster fox took a deep breath. She turned into smoke and returned to the book. The Western Wasteland Imperial race was currently hunting her down, and she hadn't fully recovered from her injuries. She had to stay here and recuperate. As for the future, naturally, it would depend on the situation. If there was a chance, she wouldn't mind turning this house into a sea of fire. Min Xiangtai and the two maids woke up one after the other. They looked at each other, but they only felt that the weather was warm and they were tired. They didn't think too much about it. Looking back at the book that was still on the bookshelf, Min Xiangtai calmed down and smiled. He continued to bury his head in his books, because the fairy in the book had already promised that as long as he was successful in his studies and obtained scholarly honors, she would consider being his wife for a lifetime and become a celestial couple. Thinking of this, Min Xiangtai felt like his body was filled with endless strength. Wutong Commandery's Li family's old ancestor, Li Zicheng, requested to see the emperor. Because of the contract from back then, the imperial palace had no reason to refuse. Very soon, the palace doors opened. Mother Wu, who had appeared a few times before, respectfully led the way. Li Zicheng looked at her back, a look of surprise on his face, but he seemed to have thought of something and didn't say anything in the end. The journey was smooth. Mother Wu stopped outside the longevity hall and turned around. "Ancestrally, His Majesty is waiting for you in the hall." She was well-mannered and her expression was calm. Li Zicheng cupped his hands together. "Thank you." He glanced at the cold and sharp old woman and stepped into the hall. "Ancestrally, we haven't seen each other for 1,000 years, right?" His Majesty's laughter rang out, making one feel as if they were bathing in a spring breeze. The conversation ended on a happy note. The great emperor had clearly expressed his support for the Li family old ancestor's proposal to investigate the murder of Li Tsangzhou. Li Zicheng was satisfied. The two sides spoke about Wudong County and the Li family of the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture. Then old ancestor Li stood up and bid his farewells. The great emperor personally stood up to send him off. Li Zicheng smiled and declined, saying that His Majesty didn't need to do this, but he still allowed him to walk out of the hall. "Your Majesty, please stop. Otherwise, I really won't dare to come to the imperial palace again." The great emperor smiled and nodded. "That's fine. Then I ask Mother Wu to send Ancestor Li out on my behalf. As I said, if there is anything you need from the imperial family, Ancestor Li can ask." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Old Ancestor Li cupped his hands together. Mother Wu bowed to His Majesty and accepted the order. She gestured with her hand. "Ancestor Li, please." Old Ancestor Li nodded. The two of them walked out of the imperial palace, one in front and one behind. Standing at the entrance of the hall, the great emperor looked at the backs of the two people and sighed. He said in a soft voice, "I really want to cut off that old thing's head so he can open his eyes wide and understand the dignity of a ruler." Behind him, a young eunuch slowly walked out. He said in a soft voice, "Your Majesty, please bear with it. Wudong County's Li family isn't much, but they are still a chess piece for others. If you touch them, there will be trouble." "That's right, so I have to bear with it." The Western Wasteland Great Emperor looked up at the imperial palace. A cold smile appeared on his face. "In your own home, if you have to bear with outsiders, then you simply aren't strong enough. Otherwise, who would dare say anything when you punch out? I want to be the first person in Huangzhou to punch out, but there are mountains on my back and there is a stinking swamp under my feet. I don't know when I can clean up the situation." The young eunuch was silent for a moment. He said, "As long as Your Majesty has the heart and works hard, there will be a day when your wish will be achieved." The great emperor turned around and pointed at the young eunuch. He laughed and scolded. "You old thing! You said that not long after I ascended the throne, and you still say it now. But I am no longer the young man in the past. I don't have so much patience and time." The great emperor waved his hand as if to sweep away the depression and dissatisfaction in his heart. He took the initiative to change the topic. "How is the investigation going?" The young eunuch said, "It has been investigated. Li Zhangzhou entered the imperial capital from Xuanzhen sect, and then went directly to Zhongwu home mansion. This matter has been revealed by Yuan Yiba, the defending general." The great emperor frowned. "This name sounds familiar." The young eunuch said, "He is one of the candidates chosen by Your Majesty in the early years of your ascension to the throne, but because of an accident, he has been useless since then." The great emperor's expression was calm. He said lightly, "As expected, even I have times where I make mistakes. So, when you have the chance, you might as well take a look. As for things like face and trust, they are the things that the great emperor should not have." The young eunuch was convinced. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty is right." Outside the imperial palace, Li Zicheng wanted to say something, but stopped. Mother Wu said lightly, "Ancestor Li, take care." She turned and left. Looking at her back, Li Zicheng's eyes showed a trace of complexity. He sighed and left. Without any warning, the murder of the Wudong County's Li clan's disciple was like a large stone that smashed into the deep pool that was the imperial capital. It shocked countless bastards, big and small, and they all opened their eyes, thinking about what mysteries were behind this matter. After all, Li Zicheng came to the imperial capital personally. This alone was enough to show that this matter was not ordinary. Everyone was waiting for the follow-up news to come. So, when Xuanzhen sect's General Yuan Yiba was taken away by the Ministry of Justice for questioning, the matter of his death being taken over by a magpie's nest and entering the imperial capital was confirmed. Soon, a heavy piece of news followed. Li Zhangzhou, who was taken over by the magpie's nest, entered the imperial capital and only went to one place in the city. Then, he quickly left the imperial capital. The follow-up traces were still being investigated. But now, no one had too much time to pay attention to it, because the place Li Zhangzhou went to was the Zhongwu Marquis' mansion. In recent years, the most prominent and eye-catching person in the Western Wasteland Empire was undoubtedly this newly promoted Marquis. Not to mention the shocking speed of his rise, he quickly became an important general of the Empire's military. Even a rumor in the imperial capital spread the reputation of General Jin Wuning far and wide. More and more people dared to provoke him. The dignified Yi family, one of the two mountains in the military, was despised and suppressed by the emperor clans. This was the root cause. For a moment, countless eyes gathered, waiting for the next development of the matter. The Wudong County's Li family's background, heritage, and strength might be shrouded in fog, but the nobles in the court were well aware of it. If the Zhongwu Marquis was really involved in the matter of killing the Li family's Li family, then this matter would become even more lively. Chapter 1585. Li Zicheng once again entered the palace to meet with the emperor. He said that this matter involved a general of the Western Desolation Army, and that he needed the emperor's permission before he could go deeper. Disregarding everything else, the great emperor still enjoyed this superficial attitude. He immediately declared, "Ancestor Li, rest assured that I will immediately order for General Jinwu Ningqin to come to the imperial palace." But soon, news came back that Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin had gone into seclusion a few days ago and had yet to come out. The great emperor patted his forehead and smiled. I was confused. A few days ago, Marquis Zhongwu came to the imperial palace and asked me for a few treasures. He said that he had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation and would try to use external forces to break through his current realm. I think that's it. Li Zicheng frowned slightly. He thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, this old man naturally believes you, but this old man earnestly requests that your Majesty allow me to personally make a trip to the loyal Marshal Marquis estate. I guarantee that I won't do anything drastic, or I'm willing to accept His Majesty's thunderous punishment." The great emperor smiled and waved his hand. "I trust, Ancestor Li. If you want to go, then go." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Li Zicheng bid farewell and left. The Li family of Wudong County is indeed extraordinary. You said that you trust me, but you still want to take a look, and you want me to personally agree. The great emperor said softly, his eyes deep. A feminine voice sounded. "Why don't I make a trip and accompany Ancestor Li to the loyal Marquis estate?" The great emperor shook his head. "No need. Now is not the time for you to be exposed." A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Furthermore, I really want to know what that old fool Li Zicheng wants to do." This was the imperial capital, and he was the emperor of the West Baron. As long as he was on the throne, he could control the fate of the entire country. It was one thing for them to be fine, but if they really broke the rules, did they really think that he, the emperor of the world, would not dare to kill them? Li Zicheng was very efficient. He left the large palace and boarded the carriage. He ordered indifferently to the loyal Marshal Marquis Manor. He turned around, and the carriage behind him followed. In the carriage, Li Gu held his sword with both hands and sat upright, as if he did not care about his surroundings at all. In the opposite corner, Chun Shanglu's face was pale. He clenched his fists tightly within his robe sleeves and coughed from time to time with his head lowered. Li Ruhua opened her eyes. "Li Gu." Her eyes were bright, revealing a faint majesty. Li Gu frowned slightly. He still did not open his eyes, but the formless sword and tent around him slowly disappeared. Chan Shanglu let out a deep breath and cupped his hands together. "Immortal Master, Li's swordsmanship is divine. I truly admire you." Li Gu did not respond at all. Chen Shanglu was not annoyed either. He cupped his fists at Li Ruhua to express his gratitude. Li Ruhua smiled, glanced at him, and did not speak again. The carriage fell into silence once again. Fortunately, the imperial palace wasn't far from the eastern city where the vermilion flowers gathered. The carriage soon stopped. Li Gu opened his eyes and was the first to push the door open. Li Ruhua took 2 steps and turned around. "Chun Shanglu, do you want to come with us?" Chun Shanglu shook his head. Without the slightest hesitation, he said, "I will be in the carriage waiting for Immortal Master and Fairy Maiden to return." Li Ruhua looked at him with admiration. She nodded and got out of the car. Li Gu stood outside the car, not afraid that Chen Shangle would hear him. You should know your place. Don't have any thoughts that you shouldn't have. Li Ruhua smiled brightly. What did you say? I don't understand. It's best if you don't understand. Li Zicheng walked over. The two didn't speak anymore, bowing at the same time. Old ancestor. Cough. This is the Zhongwu Marquis Manor. His Majesty has already allowed us to personally pay a visit. You two come with me. The Wudong Commandery's Li family had come to visit. The gatekeeper did not dare to delay and quickly ran to report. True Saint Baiyu was in the manor today, but whether it was his status or cultivation, he was clearly not qualified to personally receive the Li family's old ancestor. The general was in seclusion, and he didn't dare to disturb the great-grandmother in the backyard. As he was anxiously pulling at his hair, Little Meat had already arrived in the front yard. She glanced at him and said, What are you standing there for? Open the door and welcome the guests. Her tone was unkind, but True Saint Baiyu relaxed and revealed a happy expression. With this great-grandmother personally appearing, a great figure like the Li family's old ancestor seemed to suddenly become ordinary. The beating heart in his chest immediately calmed down. He cupped his hands together and said, Yes, I will go now. With his head held high and his chest puffed out, he walked to the main entrance and bowed towards the three people of the Li family. General Jinwu, Baiyu greets the old ancestor and the two little immortals. My family's general is in seclusion, and the madam heard that the three of you have come to visit, so she ordered me to invite you in. His response was flawless. For better or worse, he was from a branch family of the Emperor clans, the nephew of the sky-bearing king, and a true, noble young master of the imperial capital. With such confidence in his heart, his actions were calm and composed. Li Zicheng nodded. Thank you. I don't dare. Ancestor Li and the two little immortals, please. Baiyu turned and led the way. The main hall of the manor, the reception hall. Little Meat sat on the main seat. Her eyelids opened and closed. She lightly said, My family's marquis is in seclusion. As a woman, I shouldn't casually show my face in public. But the one who has come is ancestrally, so I can only put up a front. I ask that you don't take offense. Just looking at the words, it wasn't very polite, but it was still within the bounds of etiquette. But coming from Little Meat's mouth, there really wasn't much respect. Adding on the fact that she didn't respond at all in her, but didn't leave her seat, it was already clear that she didn't care about the person who had come. Li Zicheng's eyes suddenly surged with anger. The Wudong Commandery's Li family had always had a transcendent status in the western wilderness. Although they had always behaved themselves these past few years and tried to reduce their contact with the outside world, who wouldn't lower themselves when they saw someone from the Li family. Moreover, it was him, the dignified ancestor of the Li family, who had personally come. Even the western wilderness great emperor had to be polite. With a single thought, he could interfere with the outside world. The air suddenly froze. The faces of the maids serving here were all pale. They felt as if they had fallen into a swamp, unable to move. Even breathing was difficult. Baiyu, who was guarding outside the door, had a slight change in expression. Then he immediately calmed down. Firstly, Li Zicheng didn't go too far, only limiting his aura within the hall. Secondly, this pressure, this feeling, it was far from the madam's. He wasn't worried at all. Little Meat coldly laughed. Ancestrally, this isn't Wudong Commandery. As a guest, you can't bully the host family just because of your cultivation. She straightened her body. Her young face was solemn and oppressive. Before you came, you should have heard that the marquis of my family is cultivating in seclusion. Apart from this, I won't hide it from you. There is an artifact that is being refined in the cauldron. If my marquis's cultivation is affected because of you, or if that artifact is damaged ancestrally, are you sure you can bear the corresponding consequences? When she opened her mouth and said the first sentence, The pressure that enveloped the hall was swept away. At this moment, her gaze covered Li Zicheng. It actually caused this old monster with unfathomable cultivation to feel uneasy from the bottom of her heart. Li Ruhua suddenly took a step forward and cupped her hands. The Wutong Commandery's Li family has indeed been disrespectful. I hope Madam doesn't take offense. Little Meat glanced at her. Her eyes were calm, but it caused her heart to palpitate. She suddenly felt a strong sense of unease. 2 days ago, the one who was spying on us from outside the manor should have been you. Alarm bells sounded in Li Ruhua's heart, but her expression remained calm. She smiled and said it was indeed me. Madam's methods are excellent. This junior admires you to the extreme. Little Meat waved her hand. Don't call yourself junior. Between the two of us, it isn't certain who is older. Of course, this was purely referring to the age of this mortal body. But Little Meat spoke with confidence and confidence. It was clear that she had successfully misled them. Li Ruhua's eyes flashed, revealing a thoughtful look. Without waiting for her to think further, Little Meat said, Our manor knows about the murder, but no matter whether you believe it or not, this matter has nothing to do with the Marquis. Li Ruhua said in a soft voice, We are willing to believe, madam, but everything needs evidence. It isn't good to make empty promises. That's right. Then let's stop here for today. When my Marquis comes out of seclusion, you can come again. Little Meat ordered them to leave. Li Zicheng's expression became uglier. Little Meat glanced at him. You're already so old, and yet you still can't understand your own position. Look at this little girl. She hasn't even expressed anything. As she spoke, she looked at the silent Li Ge. The sword in your hand is indeed good, but I have seen even better swords. Moreover, sword cultivators ultimately cultivate themselves. There is no future for them to rely on external strength. Shua! Li Ge fiercely looked up, a divine light surging in his eyes. It was like invisible swords were circling around him, ready to howl out at any moment. Little Meat seemed interested. Her lips curled up in a smile. Not convinced. You can try. I will sit here without moving. If you can harm me in the least, consider yourself fierce. Li Ge! Li Ruhua frowned and shouted out loud. Li Ge took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The sword intent around him was completely restrained. He turned and left. Li Ruhua revealed a smile. Madam, we will disturb you again in the future. While it couldn't be considered a tense confrontation, it was certain that they would part on bad terms. True Saint Bai Tu saw the 3 people from the Li family leave. His back became even straighter. He didn't think that there was anything wrong with his madam's actions. You people said that you came to pay a visit, but this matter has already spread throughout the imperial capital. You said that our general killed a junior of your Li family. Wasn't this clearly making us enemies? Of course, there was no need to be polite. Moreover, the madam was indeed fierce. Even though the Li family had an old ancestor and 2 extraordinary little immortal masters, she still held the upper hand, suppressing them from start to finish. Ancestor Li, little immortal masters, take care. Bai Tu cupped his hands together, neither servile nor overbearing. Humph! Li Zicheng coldly coughed and stepped onto the carriage first. Li Ge and Li Ruhua entered the carriage behind and left. Is it her? Li Ge suddenly asked. Li Ruhua thought for a moment and shook her head. I cannot be sure, but I cannot see through this madam. She paused, a dignified look on her face. In fact, if she wasn't in front of me, I wouldn't be able to confirm that she was sitting there. Li Ge said in a low voice, My sword can't lock onto her at all. The 2 youths who came from the central wasteland divine continent, who had pushed through realms and looked down on everyone, felt a sense of dread from the bottom of their hearts. The insignia General Ningqin had even more secrets hidden on his body. His madam was actually such an unfathomable character. But like this, The possibility that he was the new king of the barbarians was greatly reduced. The reason was simple. If General Jinwu really was the new king of the barbarians, he wouldn't have dared to act so recklessly. They didn't believe that Little Meat's actions today were all her own decision. She must have communicated with General Jinwu ahead of time. The carriage fell silent. The two young Li family powerhouses fell into deep thought. Chun Shangolf suddenly said, "Immortal Master, Fairy Maiden, although I don't know what you are doing, now that things have come to this, I fear it will not be easy to retreat." "Humph!" Li Gu coldly sneered. Chun Shangolf spat out a mouthful of blood, his face pale. "Put away your thoughts, or I will kill you right now." Li Ruhua had a calm expression. "Li Gu, Chun Shangolf is right. Although you and I hid our identities and came to Wudong County's Li family, I fear this matter cannot be hidden from the Western Wasteland. We don't care about Wudong County's face, but you and I cannot lose face for our family. Otherwise there will be trouble." Li Gu said, "If it weren't for this, he would already be dead." Li Ruhua smiled. "Interesting. I haven't seen him yet, but I am a little curious about Marquis Ningqin. Even if he isn't the person you and I are looking for, I still feel that there must be some relationship between the two of us. This isn't a supernatural ability, but my intuition, believe me, sometimes a woman's intuition, especially one that hasn't left home yet, is so accurate that it makes one sigh in admiration." She glanced at Chun Shangolf. He had his head lowered, coughing nonstop. Drops of blood seeped out from the corners of his mouth. Marquis Zhongwu Manor. After sending away a group of maids who looked at her with starry eyes, Little Meat coldly sneered. "You two little things want to play tricks with me? You are far too lacking. Comparing intuition? Biting onto something and not letting go? No matter, let's continue. The main event hasn't arrived yet." She took a step forward, and her figure vanished from sight. Chapter 1586. Master Min let out a long sigh. His face was gloomy. These 2 days, he did not even have the energy to enter the residence's new concubine's door. All day long, he held a wine pot in his hand and drank 2 mouthfuls, muttering to himself, "I'm sitting at home, and the pot falls from the sky? This is really bad luck." "It's not that bad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have appeared here." A voice suddenly rang out behind him. Lord Min's face stiffened. He put down the wine jug and turned around. He saw a beautiful lady sitting in the pavilion. She looked delicate and timid, but the look in her eyes made him feel as if he were in a sea of fire and a mountain of daggers, as if he could be consigned to eternal damnation at any moment. Gulp! Old Master Min swallowed his saliva and bowed with a pale face. "Min Zhongjing greets Fairy. I wonder if you—" Meaty flicked her fingernails. "If you say any more nonsense, I won't be polite anymore. I'll make a move and beat your true body out." Old Master Min had a bitter look on his face. "Fairy, spare me." Meaty said, "I'm going to tell you something. Once you've done it, we'll pretend we've never met." Following that, only her lips could be seen moving, but not the slightest sound could be heard. "Understood." Old Master Min coughed lightly. "Fairy, I made a vow many years ago. Today I betrayed Nine-Tailed. I really can't get over this. It's better for you to die than for me. Don't you understand this logic? Moreover, didn't you say that the world is one big family?" Old Master Min's face was full of helplessness. "I didn't say that." Little Meat sneered. "I don't care about that. You have 2 choices. Either do as I say, or I'll kill you right now." With a long sigh, Lord Min stood up and bowed. "Everything is as Fairy has said." Little Meat snapped her fingers. "Very good." She got up and walked away. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she disappeared. Old Master Min looked at the empty space and frowned. He slowly sat down and reached for the wine pot. He tilted his head back and took a sip. Unfortunately, his aim was not very good. The wine didn't enter his mouth. Instead, he used it to wash his face. He shivered on the spot. Hoochie, hoochie, he gasped for breath. His cold sweat was like a breached dam. He didn't even have time to wipe it off. Soon, the sweat soaked through his robe and stuck to his skin. Lowering his head to look at himself, who was trembling like a pendulum, Old Man Min let out a bitter laugh. He really did not expect to meet such a terrifying existence. He seemed to be struggling and hesitant when he was dealing with her earlier, but that was all an act. The moment he saw little flesh, he almost knelt down on the spot. It couldn't be helped. Who asked him to be born with good eyesight? Selling out the 9-tailed demon fox was indeed a breach of the oath he had sworn. However, this little girl was courting death by provoking such a powerful figure. It was better for her to be killed as soon as possible. Otherwise, there was no telling when the entire demon race would be wiped out. That was definitely the right word to use. As long as that woman wished it, all the demons in the world would be slaughtered. Min Chang-jing did not doubt this at all. After all, he had once peeped at the peak of the mountain from afar. However, why did this matter involve the Wutong Commandery's Li family? His thoughts raced. He thought back to the recent case of a Li family disciple being killed in the imperial capital. Min Changjing's eyes widened, and he subconsciously looked towards a place in the eastern part of the city. Little thing, you are quite smart. But the more you are like this, the more delicious your brain is. Do you want to know how I know this? A cold sneer sounded out in his mind. Min Changjing fell to his knees, not daring to speak or move. Humph! A terrifying aura slowly retreated. After a long time, Old Man Min stood up. He took a deep breath to calm his mind and walked outside. Outside a small pavilion in the courtyard, there were several beautiful maids. The steward, who had always been a trusted aide of the Old Man Min, also had a worried look on his face. Outside, as the maids saw the Old Man Min walk out, they all hurriedly bowed. They had been here just now, but they had been completely unaware of what had happened in the pavilion. Steward, hasn't the great-uncle's birthday invitation been delivered? Ask Min Xiangtai to go immediately and prepare a generous gift. The steward looked hesitant. He first bowed to accept the order, then said, Old Master, there is still half a month to great-uncle's birthday. Should we let young Master go now? Old Man Min said lightly, since he has been enlightened and is really ready to study, a great scholar like great-uncle is the best teacher. Let him study for a period of time. After a pause, his voice became colder. Tell Min Xiangtai that if he dares not to go, I will break his legs. The steward turned around and left. He was quite puzzled. His old master occasionally mentioned great-uncle and usually mocked him as a pedantic scholar. Why did he take the initiative to ask young master to study? Moreover, those who knew the old master's temperament knew that he was at his most serious. He didn't look too strict at this moment. Min Xiangtai made a fuss for a while and was pulled back by the old steward. He whispered something in his ear. His face gradually showed a struggle. Then he smiled bitterly. Uncle Wang, you go out first. I need to pack my things. The steward heaved a sigh of relief and said softly, I will wait for you outside. Young master, hurry up. A moment later, Min Xiangtai changed his clothes and walked out with a listless expression. The fairy maiden had told him that this residence was a land of fortune. This was why she was born from a book and couldn't easily leave. Otherwise there was a chance that she would disappear. Min Xiangtai couldn't bear to see the fairy maiden that he missed so much suffer. He immediately said that he would come quickly and that the fairy maiden would wait for him in peace. The carriage left the residence and headed towards great-uncle's house. Outside the main entrance, the owner of a breakfast shop greeted him with a smile. Young master, are you going out? Min Xiangtai braced himself and cupped his hands together. It is great-uncle's birthday. The old master asked me to go. You are busy. The boss smiled and nodded. When the carriage was far away, he wiped his hands and took off the apron tied around his waist. He handed it to his daughter behind him. Little girl, there aren't many customers right now. Look after the stall for a while. I have something to do and need to go home." He rubbed his belly. The father and daughter already had a tacit understanding. His daughter smiled and nodded. After greeting several customers, the boss walked towards his house. It wasn't too far away, just behind the residence. In the endless barbarian territory, west of Hungshan Mountain, strong winds howled. Apart from a slightly fishy smell, there was also a slightly cloying sweetness. At this time, a figure standing atop a boulder was frowning. A cold light flowed in his eyes. Behind the boulder, there was a wretched-looking man lying on the ground. His hands tightly grasped onto a depression in the boulder, and he cried out, "It's true, I didn't lie to you. When the great shaman sent me here, he personally told me, 'Let's hurry and leave. If we're too late, the great shaman will definitely be the first to kill me.'" Without waiting for a response, the man cried out even louder, "Mother, your son is about to die. I won't be able to show filial piety to you in the future. Mother, take good care of yourself. Wife, I can never go back. You are still young. In the future, you can find a man who treats you well. But don't let our children suffer. They are the flesh of my heart. Little sister, shut up." The man instantly fell silent. He lifted a hand to wipe away the few drops of tears that he squeezed out. Then he looked up. Thump! Thump! In the distance, in the boundless sea region, the sound of drums echoed out once more. Shwa! A dazzling white beam of light shot into the skies. The man cried out miserably and hurriedly covered his eyes. This time he had really suffered a bit. It wasn't too much, nor too little. Now his eyes had turned blood red. Tears tumbled down, mixing with the faint color of blood. In the next moment, the man was lifted up. A strong wind blew against him, causing his face to tremble. Can he really save me? Woo, 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 woo. The man cried out, but before he could say a single word, his voice was forced back into his stomach by the wind. The person who had transformed into a sword shadow actually understood what he was saying. He sneered, "If he can save me, then what does it matter if I agree to his conditions? But if he is playing a joke on me, then he's dead." The man held his head in his hands and curled up into a ball. He felt as if his entire body would be torn apart by the violent air currents. He thought that it was hard to say whether Marquis Zhongwu would die or not. But if things continued like this, he feared he would die first. Whoosh! A boundless sword light howled through the skies. Its speed was as fast as thunder, disappearing without a trace. Little Meaty suddenly looked up towards the west. Her eyebrows arched up, a bit of surprise in her eyes. But that was it. In this world, there weren't many existences that could arouse her attention, and there were even fewer that were worthy of her attention. But now there was an exception. Little Meaty drew back her gaze and frowned. She looked towards Qin Yu's seclusion room. This boy, his tenacity isn't bad. Moreover, his cultivation background is much deeper than I imagined. But now isn't the time to make a breakthrough. I have to suppress it for a bit. Little Meaty picked up a teacup and took a sip before putting it down. With a light pop, she had already vanished from where she stood. In the next moment, she appeared in front of Qin Yu. The seclusion room was filled with an obscure and shaking aura. Shwa! Qin Yu opened his eyes and stared at Little Meaty in front of him. His withered lips moved, and his voice was hoarse like rusty iron slowly rubbing against each other. "You came? I originally thought that you would feel a bit guilty seeing me like this, but it seems that I was thinking too much." Little Meaty coughed. "Qin Yu, it is said that only those who suffer the most hardship can rise above others?" "That's right. So I really must thank you," Qin Yu said earnestly. Little Meaty felt a bit guilty, but the aura that flooded the room indicated that her breakthrough was imminent. There was no time for her to hesitate. "Qin Yu, since you already know, I won't explain anything to you. In short, now isn't the best time to make a breakthrough, so you'll have to hold it in for a bit longer. Believe me, it won't be too long. At most, you will experience a little more tempering, but your own safety won't be a problem. So let's agree on this. She stepped forwards and placed a finger between Qin Yu's eyebrows. Like a pot of boiling water, she sealed off the only outlet. In the blink of an eye, Qin Yu's face flushed red. His eyes widened as he looked at little Meaty. He wanted to speak, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he let out a pitiful scream. She understood Qin Yu's temperament and knew just what it would feel like to make him scream on the spot. Little Meaty felt a bit uncomfortable as he stared at her with his bloodshot eyes. She coughed and ran away. Hold on for a bit longer. Cough, cough, then I'll leave first. Schwa, she turned and vanished. Little Meaty, eh? Qin Yu's suppressed roars echoed out from his seclusion chamber. Hiss, he sat back down in his chair and picked up a cup of tea, drinking it all in one gulp. He didn't seem to quench his thirst, so he picked up the teapot and gulped it down, not caring at all that the tea was scalding hot. This time was Qin Yu really angry? Thinking about it, anyone who had suffered the pain of being skinned alive and had just managed to free themselves would be kicked back into a pot of boiling oil. They would likely gnash their teeth in hatred. But this old lady was really doing this for your own good. If you make a breakthrough now, you won't be able to obtain those benefits in the future. Little Meaty had a helpless expression. She rubbed her temples, cursing inwardly. This was really a dog biting Lu Dongbin. On the other side, she was also annoyed at her current state. Qin Yu, just who the hell are you? Chapter 1587. Within Min Xiangtai's study, the two maids were dismissed. Min Changjing sat down and drank tea. Wisps of mist flew out from the heaven-shrouding book. The nine-tailed monster fox wore a white dress and bowed. This little monster greets master. May I ask why you have come today? Her expression was calm and her eyes were filled with confusion. But underneath that expression was fear and vigilance. Min Changjing sighed and put down the teacup. There has been a change in the situation. I sent Min Xiangtai away to explain things to you. The nine-tailed monster fox didn't say anything. Master, please speak. Min Changjing said, You can't continue hiding in my house. The Western Wasteland has already detected some traces of this heaven-shrouding book. The nine-tailed monster fox frowned. She looked up and a cold smile appeared on her face. Master, are you bullying this little monster for being ignorant? Heaven-shrouding book is a divine item of my monster race. Even if it is in the Western Wasteland's capital, how could it be exposed? Moreover, with you here, it is even easier to hide from the heavens. Min Changjing looked at her and lightly said, I am willing to explain things to you, but don't think that I have the responsibility to protect you. This is a different concept. You must understand. He took another sip of tea and put it down. The nine-tailed monster fox's heart chilled. There was even more fear in the depths of her eyes. Heaven-shrouding book itself cannot be detected by the Western Wasteland. But someone knows that I have this book. You caused too much of a commotion that day. His Majesty in the Imperial Palace ordered us to find you. Although he feels like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river, as long as he doesn't abdicate, he will still be the Western Wasteland's emperor. My family has lived peacefully in the imperial capital for many years. We won't break the peace just because of you. So, I let you leave Heaven-shrouding book. The nine-tailed monster fox didn't believe these words because it didn't matter if they were true or false. Her expression was cold. If I leave the Heaven-shrouding book, I will soon be exposed. As Master said, the Western Wasteland won't let me go. Since I know the consequences, I won't easily leave. In this world, even the fox race that wasn't skilled in direct combat still had the confidence of a great monster. Although she couldn't see through the old man in front of her, who seemed to be ordinary to the naked eye, she wouldn't do something like waiting for death to come. Min Changjing lightly said, I'm letting you go, not forcing you to die. Otherwise, I wouldn't have tacitly allowed you to stay at home. I still owe the monster race. People from the Li family of Wudong Commandery have arrived in the imperial capital. Although you are hiding in shrouding heaven, the essence qi of Shishu and Shi has been consumed by you. You should know about these things. Min Zhangjing glanced at her and continued in an indifferent tone. Of course, this is just a small matter. It's normal for demons to eat humans, so I'm not angry about it. To put it simply, those two juniors of the Wudong County's Li clan are from the Li clan of the central, desolate, divine prefecture. The nine-tailed fox's eyes lit up. Min Changjing said, "Do you understand what I mean? As long as you secretly obtain the protection of the Li family, you will naturally be able to leave the western wasteland safely. You might even be able to obtain another fortune." The nine-tailed fox thought for a moment and respectfully bowed. "Thank you, master, but I need to confirm something. So, please allow me to use this Shrouding Heaven manual for 2 days." Min Changjing coldly sneered. "Fox, it seems that I was too easy to talk to today, causing you to lose your sense of propriety. The Shrouding Heaven manual is mine, and you can't take it away. At most, I can lend you a shadow that can protect you for 2 days. If you don't agree, then think of a way yourself." The nine-tailed fox lightly smiled and bowed. "Then we will do as master says." Soon, a white shadow flashed in the residence. The nine-tailed fox revealed her true form and disappeared into the distance. This was because the shadow of the Shrouding Heaven manual had covered it up. It concealed itself within, isolating its own aura. Master Min stood outside the study, holding the Shrouding Heaven manual. It seemed to be much more worn down than before. He looked down and revealed a cold smile. Then he immediately calmed down. "Your Majesty, Zhongwu Marquis Manor has sent a secret letter." Eunuch Wei Ming knelt on the ground and respectfully presented the jade slip with both hands. Behind the bead curtains, the great emperor's eyes flashed. "Bring it here." "Yes." Wei Ming carefully walked up from the side and placed the jade slip on the table. He stood up and bowed once more. Then he left the study. The great emperor picked up the jade slip and probed it with his divine sense. In the next moment, his eyes brightened and a sharp light surged within them. Pa! The jade slip shattered. A faintly discernible shadow appeared in the great emperor's hand. His eyes became increasingly cold. "That clan?" In the hall, a surprised voice sounded out. The young eunuch walked out from the shadows. The great emperor lightly said, "It was sent from Zhongwu Marquis Manor. It is said that they captured a trace of aura from the dead Li Cangzhou." The young eunuch thought for a moment. "Your Majesty cannot easily believe this." The great emperor narrowed his eyes. "I can choose not to believe it, but the aura of that clan cannot be faked. Things are becoming more and more interesting." Although he said it was interesting, his words were filled with boiling, killing intent. He thought of Wudong Commandery's Li family and even the central, desolate, divine continent's Li family, as well as the nine-tailed fox that appeared in the imperial capital. He always felt that there were some secrets hidden within. And whether it was that clan or the Li family, it wasn't easy to move against them right now. The only breakthrough point was that nine-tailed fox. The great emperor took a deep breath. "Li Shouqing, I will give you 3 more days. You must find the whereabouts of that nine-tailed fox." The young eunuch hadn't been called by his true name for many years. He furrowed his eyebrows and pain flashed in his eyes, but he soon composed himself. He bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Wudong Commandery's Li family lived in their fiefdom all year round and rarely sent their clansmen out. But in the imperial capital, they also had a luxurious residence that was comparable to a noble lord's. Li Zicheng arrived at the imperial capital and naturally moved in. This residence that had been cold for many years suddenly became lively, although there weren't any ministers of the court that openly expressed their closeness. The number of people that came in from the back door of the residence and left after placing down their gifts was truly astonishing. After all, this was the Li family before the nation's surname. The Li family had been in harmony with each other for so many years, and the meaning behind this was profound. It indeed had the qualifications for people to place their bets on them. It wasn't that they needed to obtain something now, but that they needed to leave behind some kinship so that they could negotiate in the future. Young ancestors, that woman from the Zhongwu Marquis Manor is truly despicable. I will immediately send word to Wudong Commandery and have the other 2 clansmen of the same realm come over. She must pay the price. Li Zicheng said lowly, his voice cold. Li Ge was expressionless. After leaving the Zhongwu Marquis Manor, he had been frowning as if thinking about something. Li Ruhua smiled faintly and waved her hand. No need to trouble yourself. That woman is not to be trifled with. We won't clash with her. She's a tough nut to crack, and we can leave it to the western wilderness. Li Zicheng bowed. Young ancestors are magnanimous. After saying a few more words, he stood up and bid farewell. When he left the courtyard the 2 were in, his expression returned to normal. Old monsters that had lived for countless years, even if they were from the Wudong Commandery's Li family, to be able to cultivate to the peak of the ruler realm and be only half a step away from the emperor realm meant that they were intelligent people. How could they be so frivolous because of such a small matter? Making a big fuss was more of a show for the 2 youths of the family to express their attitude. As for that woman from the Zhongwu Marquis Manor, she was absolutely unfathomable. It would be best if they didn't clash with her. Li Ge glanced in the direction that Li Zicheng left in. Old thing, if we really let him fight, he will be the first to retreat. Li Ruhua smiled. He is just taking the opportunity to express his stance in front of us. It's not a big deal to leave a good impression. She looked over, still smiling, but her eyes were serious. You, on the other hand, don't seem to be in a good state right now. It's just a few words. Why would your sword heart waver? Li Ge furrowed his eyebrows. After a moment of silence, he said, I'm fine. Li Ruhua nodded. That's good. Go back and rest well. Li Ge stood up and left. Li Ruhua's expression wasn't relaxed as she looked at his back. She lowered her head and spread out her fingers, looking at the red spot on her palm. Go! Investigate that madam from the Zhongwu Marquis Manor. I want all information about her. When he returned to his dwelling, there was the cry of a sword. A thick sword intent flowed out like waves, isolating the entire room from the outside world and forming a quiet place similar to a small world. Li Ge sat down cross-legged, the long sword resting on his legs. He looked down at the sword blade, and little Meaty's words echoed in his mind. A sword cultivator ultimately cultivated themselves. There was no future in relying on external help. He had studied the sword since he was a child, and his talent was extraordinary. He was publicly recognized as a potential sword immortal in his clan, and his future was limitless. All along, he had been instilled with the idea that the sword in his hand was his life, the most important thing in the life of a sword cultivator. Only by finding a sword that truly suited him could he become one with the sword and pursue the supreme sword path. But today, someone had told him that there was no future in relying on external help. This was a fundamental rejection of the sword cultivator philosophy that Li Ge had always held onto. It could be said that Li Ge came from a good background and his cultivation had been smooth sailing. He hadn't experienced too many setbacks, but his sword heart had always been firm. He wouldn't waver just because of a few words from others. But that woman, in front of Li Ji's eyes, little Meaty seemed to sit on the upper hand, looking down at him with a condescending gaze. Her words seemed to be true. There was no reason. This thought drilled out from the depths of his heart, becoming increasingly strong and tumbling. Li Ge stuffily coughed, and his complexion paled. At this moment, the long sword resting on his legs began to vibrate. Shwa! He fiercely looked up. The long sword left its sheath and came slashing down, its speed as fast as lightning. Shallow cracks appeared in space. Get out here! A snow-white figure flashed out from behind the bed. Then, mist rose up and turned into a woman. Seeing her, Li Ge frowned. He raised his sword and said, "Nine-tailed monster fox!" Nine-tailed fox clans, Su Yen greets the sword immortal of the central wasteland divine continents, Li clan. Her eyes were cold as she respectfully bowed. Li Ji's tone was indifferent. "What are you doing here?" The nine-tailed fox Su Yen said in a soft voice. "I was hiding in the western wasteland's imperial capital. After completing my tribulation and breaking through, I lost control of my mind, causing my true body to appear and provoking trouble. I am now being hunted down by the western wasteland. Today, I came to find Sword Immortal in hopes that Sword Immortal will save me. In the future, Su Yen is willing to serve by your side as repayment." Repayment? Li Ge was expressionless. Based on what? Su Yen looked up. "Nine-tailed monster fox. My realm is comparable to that of a heavenly demon, and I can transform into a myriad of forms." As she spoke, her appearance changed. Her eyes turned icy cold, and she looked at him aggressively. "Li Ge, do you want to die?" Li Ge was silent for several breaths of time. Then he said in a low voice, "Come here." Chapter 1588. Li Ruhua gave the order to investigate all information about the madam of the Zhongwu Marquis Manor, and before her, someone had already done so. The Western Wastelands Intelligence Agency had been operating for many years and could already investigate the entire world. Even the fallen demonic sect had spies placed within it. Soon, all the information regarding Midi was sorted out, filtered, summarized, and sent into the Imperial Palace through secret channels. I can allow General Jinwu to keep some secrets, but these secrets must be within a controllable range. The great emperor had a faint expression. He placed down the jade slip containing the information. His expression was calm, and his eyes surged with a firm will that could not be questioned. The sky-bearing monarch bowed. "Your Majesty, I haven't found anything wrong with this information. It's just that I haven't found out anything about the madam's background." The great emperor said, "Then continue to investigate. In my western wasteland, there are no secrets that can truly hide from my eyes." "Yes, Your Majesty." The sky-bearing monarch bowed. Without waiting for a reply, he turned and left. He thought of Bai Su, who was currently beside Marquis Zhongwu. He frowned, a bit of worry in his eyes. Although His Majesty had high hopes for Marquis Zhongwu, he had been worried and distrustful of him several times. His Majesty was suspicious, and this was something the sky-bearing monarch already knew. But when it came to Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin, this was infinitely magnified. He always felt that there was something hidden within, but this didn't affect the sky-bearing monarch's general judgment. His Majesty wasn't close to Marquis Zhongwu in the depths of his heart. Before the world-breaking command was completed, perhaps His Majesty would continue to favor him. But once this matter was completed, Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin would absolutely be in trouble. It seemed that arranging for Bai Su to be close to Marquis Zhongwu was a bit rash. But His Majesty clearly knew this, and yet he didn't stop it. In the future, if something happened to Marquis Zhongwu, how could Bai Su, who had a close relationship with him, stay out of it? Thinking of this, the sky-bearing monarch took a deep breath. He still felt a chill in his heart. As he walked down the long road of the Li Palace, his footsteps became increasingly heavy. In the study, the great emperor was expressionless. After a moment of silence, he flicked his sleeves, and this small world was isolated from the outside world. It wasn't just the great emperor's own cultivation, but also the circulation of the palace's aura with a single thought. Even an emperor realm cultivator wouldn't be able to probe this place. He turned around and sat down. He didn't move at all, but the space in front of him violently shook and darkness gradually appeared. It was pitch black and deathly silent. Just looking at him caused one to feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. The great emperor frowned slightly and flicked his finger. Suddenly, there was light in the darkness. The extinguished torch on the wall was reignited. The flames illuminated the darkness, but they could not dispel the chill. The figure that was chained slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were crimson, as if they contained two abysses of blood. The corners of his mouth curled up. His long hair draped over his shoulders, revealing only half of his handsome and pale face. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty, my dear father, you've come again. It seems that your Majesty has listened to everything I've said to you." Humph! The great emperor snorted angrily. The chains that were chaining the figure erupted with lightning at the same time. The terrifying power of lightning struck the person's body like 10,000 swords piercing through his heart. His body tensed up and he raised his head to let out a miserable scream. His long hair turned to ash in the blink of an eye, revealing a familiar face. Li Siji, third emperor. According to the agreement made by the ancestors, his full name should be Li Siji, but it was too long. The great emperor had personally ordered to erase the word Zhou from his name when he was still a minor. But this didn't mean that the great emperor was dissatisfied. He had always been very satisfied with the third prince who opposed him. Whether it was aptitude, temperament, or skill, the third prince was worthy of cultivation. He was the best candidate to take over the empire if things went wrong. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had high hopes for the third prince. But now he had ended up in such a state. He was neither human nor ghost, and even he himself wasn't sure who he was. He had become a complete madman. The lightning gradually faded. Li Siji gasped for breath. But at this time he was laughing. He was laughing so carefree that he was gasping for breath. "Your Majesty, if you don't wish to see me, then it's fine if you don't come. In any case, with the stone gate sealed, your son will never be able to leave. No one will know that such a shocking scandal has occurred in the imperial clan of the Zhou dynasty. It will not damage your Majesty's reputation and prestige." "Shut up!" the great emperor shouted. He leaned forward and looked into those crimson eyes. "Today, I will ask you one more time. Regarding the golden General Ningqin." Halfway through his words, he was interrupted by laughter. Li Siji had a strange expression, and his lips curled up in a mocking smile. "Your Majesty, in truth, you know this the best. Since you came here and wasted your time with a sinful person like me, you have already expressed the attitude in your heart. You are the great emperor of the Western Wasteland, one of the most powerful people in the world. Why can't you face your heart? Why do you always find excuses for yourself?" Without any concealment, he tore apart the hypocrisy and concealment of this great emperor. The great emperor's eyes were cold. Lightning appeared once more, drilling out from the chains and wildly pouring into Li Siji's body. He screamed in pain as his body was covered in lightning. The spatial shaking was restored. The projection of the great emperor dispersed. The figure that struggled and screamed beneath the lightning suddenly calmed down. Li Siji looked up. His twisted face revealed a strange smile. Then he opened his mouth and ruthlessly swallowed. All of the raging lightning power let out a mournful wail before shattering inch by inch and being swallowed into his stomach. The imprisoned area was restored to tranquility. Li Siji looked at the burning torches on the stone walls. The flames rapidly dimmed, and then, with a puff, they were extinguished. This place fell into endless darkness once more. Faint traces of coldness were released from within. Or, to be more precise, it was slowly becoming deeper and thicker. Li Gu pushed open the door. His expression was calm, and his aura was steady and calm. There was no trace of his sword heart wavering from yesterday. He took a deep breath and unsheathed his sword. He pointed it towards the skies, facing the 9 suns above the celestial pole. This was an extremely profound tempering technique. It seemed as if he didn't use a single sword strike, but during this process he was constantly tempering his own sword heart. Bit by bit, he was tempering the sword in his hand, constantly improving its quality. On the eaves, Li Ruhua said in a soft voice, "It looks like you had a good rest last night. Then I can rest assured." As she spoke, her eyes fell on the window of Li Ji's room. She could faintly see a woman looking at her makeup in the mirror. Li Gu lightly said, "You don't need to worry about what happens in the room." "I don't care, but you'd better hide her aura. The Western Wasteland is currently hunting her down. Don't cause any problems for the person in your room." The door opened from the inside, and the nine-tailed monster fox, Suyen, walked out. Her expression was cold and her temperament extraordinary. She bowed respectfully and said, "Fairy maiden, please rest assured. I am willing to serve in your bed. I only hope that I can borrow the sword of a sword immortal to hide my tracks and safely leave the imperial capital. I will absolutely not cause any trouble for you." She spoke straightforwardly. Li Ruhua glanced at her. "That's for the best." She turned and jumped down. Her figure disappeared. Suyen frowned. She took 2 steps forwards. "Sir, I've troubled you." "It's fine." Li Gu sheathed his sword. He looked at the nine-tailed fox and said, "But remember, Li Ruhua's status in the clan is above mine. You had best not come into conflict with her in the future." Suyen bowed. "Yes. Return to your room. Don't casually walk around. When I leave the imperial capital, I will naturally bring you out of this cage." Residential residence. Old Master Jing was eating breakfast at the same old place outside the mansion. There were steamed buns and tea that hadn't changed for many years. As he was happily eating and drinking, his lips curled up in a mocking smile. She had to say that some monsters really did like to court death. Of all the things they could do, they just had to change into her appearance to seduce others. Hee. What do you mean by the fox race being intelligent? In his opinion, they were just a bunch of clever fools that harmed others and themselves. An honest-looking and smiling boss came over and poured a spoonful of tea. "Old Master, the ingredients for these steamed buns have been improved. There's a hint of spiciness to them. What do you think?" Old Master Jing gave him a thumbs up. "Not bad, not bad. The taste is wonderful." The boss's smile became even brighter. He was clumsy and didn't know what to say. He rubbed his apron, hesitation on his face. A neighbor who had been here for many years laughed and joked. "Boss, don't tell me you want to take the initiative to send your own daughter to be old Master Jing's concubine?" Hee. Let me tell you, some people may look good on the outside, but they are actually very old and may not be of any use. We can't ruin the life of our little girl. If you really have such thoughts, my son is quite good. How about we take advantage of him?" The boss smiled and waved his hands again and again. No. Of course, if old master is willing, I will definitely agree. As for your young master, my little girl is vulgar and unworthy of him." A customer helplessly scolded. "You old man, you are usually clumsy and clumsy, but now that you refuse, you are quite flexible." Everyone burst into laughter and jeered at him. The servant girl working at the stall was so embarrassed that her face turned red. Old Master Jing exchanged a few words with them. Although he didn't take advantage of them, he still felt refreshed. This was what life should be like. He waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want to lower himself to their level. Then he glanced at the boss. "What are you standing there for? Go do what you need to do." The boss understood. He let out a sigh of relief and turned around with a smile. That day he had actually entered the mansion. The housekeeper was his friend, so it wasn't a problem for him to borrow a toilet. But the old master didn't allow him to show himself. The boss felt wronged. He felt that this little fox deserved to die for being so presumptuous in front of the old master. He was old and didn't have many years left to live. He always wanted to repay the old master's kindness before he died. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to pass away in peace. Since the old master didn't need him to do anything, then he would wait a little longer. Chapter 1589. Later Yi family. Although the storm in the imperial capital had temporarily come to an end due to the urgent military reports from the eastern, northern, and southern border armies, the courtyard was still cold and desolate. No one wanted to be remembered by His Majesty in the imperial palace at this time. Moreover, one of them was destined to rise in power in the future, the loyal martial Marquis Ningqin. Yi Gui entered the tiger fighting hall once more. He respectfully bowed to Yi Bohu and then sat down in his seat, not saying a single word. Since the marshal had asked him to come, he must have made arrangements. All he needed to do was wait. A trace of admiration flashed through Yi Bohu's eyes. He pondered for a moment and said, "Yi Gui, you're one of the smartest people in my Yi clan's younger generation. If you're willing, I can give you another chance to choose." He paused for a moment. "In fact, I might even let you take over the position of family head in the future. But this is not an absolute promise. I am only agreeing to give you a chance." But this in itself was already a sign of great importance. Those who were familiar with Yi Bohu's temperament knew that this was the greatest praise and recognition he could give to someone. Yi Gui's expression remained calm. He didn't speak, only shaking his head. Yi Bohu's expression was calm. He didn't reveal any disappointment, nor did he want to continue persuading Yi Gui. He lifted a hand and knocked on the table. "Since you've already made up your mind, I will use you as a chess piece." Yi Gui cupped his hands together. "I await the marshal's instructions. There will surely be a storm between the Wudong County's Li family and the loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin. I want you to act as my driver." Yi Bohu glanced at him, his voice becoming increasingly cold. "Remember, we have already reached an agreement with His Majesty that we will not act within the imperial capital. So, no matter what, this matter cannot have anything to do with us. Marshal, rest assured." Yi Gui stood up and walked down the hall. He knelt down and bowed. "Farewell, Marshal." He kowtowed, stood up and left. Within the tiger fighting hall, there was a light sigh. But this emotion was quickly suppressed. Yi Gui had wholeheartedly sought death. He had lived all this time for this day. He had sought benevolence and died a worthy death. A serious look appeared in Yi Bohu's eyes. He also wanted to know what kind of secret that little girl from the devil sect was hiding. In the imperial palace, the suspicious emperor chose to stand by and watch without worrying that the chess pieces in his hands would die. In addition, although His Majesty was suspicious, he had always been a man of great talent and bold vision. He was the true ruler of the world. Anyone who passed the test would be trusted for a period of time. Even if there was a test, it would be a matter for the future. After passing the test, he would be favored even more. Otherwise, he would be reduced to dust. For example, in Guanhai City, that idiot Qin Yuanshan. Thus, Yi Bohu couldn't figure out why His Majesty would repeatedly probe Golden General Ningqin. There had to be a problem. Yi Bohu couldn't help but feel a little strange. Even if the person the Yi family wanted to kill didn't die now, he would definitely die in the future. Unfortunately, time waits for no man. The Yi family could not wait for that time. Although there were 108 main cities in the capital of the western desolate continent that were connected to each other, it was not easy for anyone to enter. Although one's background was only one of the factors, it was the most important. Those with unknown backgrounds simply had no chance of stepping into the main city's transmission array. This was an extremely strict examination. It was because of this that Taisien had no choice but to borrow several sets of clothes when he entered the western wasteland. One of those clothes was the unlucky Li Sangzhou. To say that he was unlucky was true. If Taisien wanted to enter the western wasteland, he had many ways to do so. But because of the assassination of Marquis Zhongwu, the capital region's transmission array was under martial law. He didn't dare to delay any further. He had heard that there were Wutong Commandery's Li family juniors in Lunar Advent Hall, so everything that happened afterwards was a matter of course. The Wutong Commandery's Li family's reputation was certainly useful. It wouldn't be difficult for them to enter and leave the imperial capital. As for killing the Li clan's disciples, there would definitely be trouble. Iron Thread, who was as simple as putting on and taking off clothes, had nothing to fear. Not to mention, his roots had already been destroyed, the great which directly interfered with the heaven's secrets. But only at this moment, when he returned to the western wasteland, did Taisien realize what a huge mistake he had made. No wonder the Great Witch said that if something really happened, he would kill him personally to atone for his sins. For a moment, the face of the body that Taisien had borrowed was pale, and he was sweating profusely. It's over, it's over. He now truly believed that the Great Witch was serious. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Taisien raised his head and looked at the back of the figure in front of him. He cried miserably, "Lord, I didn't do it on purpose. You must save me." The white robe covered his entire body, revealing only a pair of eyes. Now he was extremely calm, without the slightest ripple. If he can save me, naturally nothing will happen. Otherwise, even if the Li family doesn't kill him, he will die in my hands. 2 days later, Taisien, who had borrowed another set of clothes, smoothly stepped into the transmission array with a white robe and a strange look on his face. Coincidentally, it was Guanhai City again. This place, I always feel that it's against my 5 elements. Could it be that something will happen? As he muttered, the transmission array lit up and the 2 figures disappeared. Zhongwu, Marquis Manor. Little Meat opened her eyes. They were calm, they had finally arrived. She took a step forward and her figure disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in the capital region. And this sort of super long distance, crossing through space, wasn't detected by the Western Wasteland Imperial Capital's Grand Array at all. From this, one could imagine how profound it was. Little Meat stood on the official road leading to the Imperial Capital. Everyone was hurrying to and fro, but none of them saw her. Even if some people bumped into her, they only flashed by. It was as if the 2 of them seemed to be in the same place, but in reality, they weren't even in the same world. Little Meat was expressionless. She lowered her head and flicked her nails. "Come out. I've been watching for a while. Tell me what you discovered." In front of her, space trembled and 2 figures appeared. Cheshien's face paled and his mouth tasted bitter. He thought that his mouth was asking for too much. Why did he have to spout nonsense? He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and fell to his knees. "Madam, please spare me. This wasn't my idea. You should know that I didn't have the guts." "Yes, that's right, it was the one behind me." She was the one who said that she wanted to take a look. "I didn't want to, but I didn't dare to resist. I wailed in my heart, but my mouth could only beg for mercy. I couldn't say another word, because the difference between the 2 people in front and behind him was that they could kill him with a glare or kill him with a sword. No one could afford to provoke them. Little Meat glanced at him. Then her eyes fell on the white robe. A trace of admiration flashed in her eyes. "Your sword cultivation is not bad. I have a sword technique with me. Do you want to try it?" There was a moment of silence under the white robe. "Okay." Little Meat snapped her fingers. Space twisted, and the 3 of them disappeared at the same time. Another 2 days passed. Lord Min was in his room, hugging his concubine and kissing her. Suddenly his eyes flashed. He sighed and patted her plump chest. "Come down. I still have something to do." The concubine nodded obediently, but her eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of bitterness. Lord Min pinched her cheeks. There's nothing I can do, but I have to do things quickly so that I can continue to live a peaceful life." He stood up and left. Leaving the concubine's courtyard, Lord Min walked towards Min, Xiangtai's residence. On the way, he met several maids, and most of them flirted with him. Unfortunately, the maids in the mansion were already familiar with their master's temperament. They didn't panic because of this, and most of them responded with flirtatious looks, causing Lord Min to sigh and sigh. He felt that public morals were degenerating day by day. Little girls nowadays were becoming more and more daring. It was only now that he was old enough to cultivate his moral character. If it was when he was young, he would have carried these little girls to bed and let them have a taste of what it meant to thrust out a spear like a dragon and overturn rivers and seas. Because of a serious illness, the old scholar and chess servant had been sent home by the master and given a large sum of money. The servants in the mansion were all envious. So, there was no one in the study today. Lord Min walked to the bookshelf and reached out to take down the heaven-shrouding book. Looking at its shabby surface, he revealed a helpless smile. As the saying goes, one can survive a disaster caused by the heavens, but one cannot survive a disaster caused by oneself. Fox, you brought about your own destruction, so don't blame me. He walked to the charcoal stove that was used to boil tea. He casually took out a match and blew on it. Soon, flames began to dance. Looking at the heaven-shrouding book in his hand, Lord Min expressionlessly tossed it in. Whew! The flames immediately rose 3 feet high, swallowing the heaven-shrouding book and gradually burning it to ashes. Lord Min's eyes revealed a bit of emotion. To kill a 9-tailed monster fox, I lost a supreme treasure of the monster race. Consider this the price for violating my oath. So, this matter is now written off. After this, karma cannot be traced back to me. He spoke to himself, but with just a few words, he had sealed the coffin of this matter and truly severed the entanglement of karma. Mysterious and mysterious, the great Tao unfathomable. Soon, the complacent expression on Lord Min's face turned into a bitter smile. He was able to separate himself from this matter. But that person in the loyal Marshal Marquis manner would not forget him. As long as that person was here, he could not truly stay out of this matter. He could only hope that the madam would keep her word. Otherwise it would truly be troublesome. Imperial Capital, Li Residence. In Li Ji's room, the demon fox Su Yen was sitting behind a desk, flipping through a book. Suddenly, her complexion changed. Without warning, her heart palpitated. The intuition of a great monster told her that a calamity was about to befall her. It was as if the heavens and earth were collapsing and all things were falling. She was trapped within, struggling with all her might to no avail. Li Go, save me! Before her scream fell, flames appeared out of thin air, wrapping around Su Yen. But what was strange was that these flames were like shadows, not leaking any heat. Even the book next to her was within range of the flames and was unharmed. But in the end it was not a shadow. At least to the demon fox Su Yen, its might surpassed all flames in the world. This was because the flames came from a sky-shrouding book. It was the absolute demonic fire that was ignited at the cost of its own destruction. When it was in perfect condition, the sky-shrouding book was a sacred item of the monster race. It could help any monster in the world conceal their own aura and hide from the heavenly secrets. But once it was ignited, the flames formed could also burn any great monster in the world to death. Their body and soul would be completely destroyed. This was the origin of the absolute demonic fire. In the flames, the cold fairy in a white dress rotted in the blink of an eye, turning into a wretched appearance like that of an evil ghost. Then, she could not even maintain her human form and revealed her true form of the 9-tailed demon fox. With a roll, the earth shook and the small courtyard Li Go was in was smashed into pieces. The absolute demonic fire was like maggots in one's bones. Once infected, it would not rest until one died. Even if the 9-tailed demon fox revealed its true form and expanded its body by a few hundred times, it was still burned by the flames and could not break free. The 9-tailed demon fox's huge body in the flames instantly attracted a lot of attention. For example, during this period of time, because of the continuous changes, the imperial capital garrison was under great pressure. There was also the little eunuch in the imperial palace who had received orders from the emperor to hunt down the 9-tailed demon fox. He walked out of the shadows and looked up at the depths of the Leaf family's residence. He saw the 9-tailed demon fox that had suddenly appeared and the absolute demonic fire that shot into the sky. His eyes revealed a serious expression. The 9-tailed demon fox was actually hiding in the Leaf family. Could it be that His Majesty's previous guess was true? No. All of this was too much of a coincidence. Also, where did the 9-tailed demon fox get its absolute demonic fire? The Leaf family? They obviously would not destroy an extremely precious, sacred item of the monster race just to do something for the Western Wasteland Empire. After all, such an item even in the divine continent of the Central Wasteland, would be coveted by everyone. It was qualified to take it out to make a big deal with the monster race. That was, someone had killed the nine-tailed demon fox and forced it to reveal itself. This plan was really big. There must be a plot behind it. It did not seem like it was only targeted at Wudong County. Could it be that it was targeting the Li family of the Central Wasteland? Chapter 1590. The little eunuch sensed something and turned around to salute respectfully. "Your Majesty." The Western Wilderness Emperor's expression was indifferent as he sneered. "I didn't expect the imperial capital to be so lively. Don't show yourself. Just stay here and watch the show with me." His eyes grew colder as he looked at the Li residence, at the absolute demon flame that soared into the sky, and at the nine-tailed demon fox that was howling in pain and struggling within. "Yes, Your Majesty." The eunuch took a step back, half of his body hidden in the shadows. He looked at His Majesty's back and could feel the cold, murderous intent. His Majesty was really angry. There must be an explanation for what happened today. The nine-tailed fox, the Li clan, and the person who summoned the demon-extinguishing flame. None of them would be able to escape. The imperial garrison, who had been pressed down and slapped violently, had lost all face. They surrounded the Li residence as quickly as possible, not allowing anyone to enter or leave. The doors to the courtyard opened, and Li Zicheng stepped out. He said in a deep voice, "This old man will give His Majesty an explanation for this matter. None of you are allowed to take a single step in." Amidst the hesitation, the crowd suddenly parted to two sides. The sky-bearing monarch walked over with an expressionless face. Ancestrally, this is the imperial capital. As the atmosphere outside the mansion grew tense, the nine-tailed monster fox within the absolute demonic flame could clearly feel the aura of death approaching. Large patches of its snow-white fur were charred and falling off, revealing sinister, rotting flesh. Its howls became even more mournful. "Li Gu! Li Gu! Save me, and you promise to take me away from the Western Wilderness imperial capital." Not far away, Li Gu stood with his sword in his arms. His eyebrows twitched, but he soon calmed down. Li Ruhua's face was expressionless and her eyes were cold. "I've reminded you not to complicate matters," Li Gu said indifferently. "Under the absolute demonic flame, the nine-tailed demon fox will die. West Wilderness knows our identities and will not force us. At most, let the Li family of Wudong County pay some price, and then the matter will be over." Li Ruhua glanced at him. That better be the case. But now there was a red spot on her palm that was constantly heating up. This made her feel uneasy. Of course, she knew about the existence of the heaven-shrouding book. The other party was willing to pay any price. So how could he let them pass so easily? Today's matter was probably targeted at the two of them from the very beginning. Li Ruhua seemed to have thought of something, and her expression became even more solemn. At this moment, the nine-tailed demonic fox, who was being burned by the absolute demonic flame, also realized Li Ji's attitude. Hatred appeared in its eyes. If the Li family of the Middle Wilderness intervened, perhaps they would have a chance to live. Otherwise, what awaited them today was death. "Li Gu!" The nine-tailed demon fox howled mournfully. She could not understand why that old thing would suddenly turn hostile and attack. But that was not important. If she didn't want to die, she could only drag more people into the mire. They would either die with her or live with her. Everyone knew that fox demons were the most sentimental. They used their own emotional tribulations as an opportunity to cultivate and break through. But other than that, once a fox demon falls in love, it will form a knot in the heart, known as the heart. This knot of heart consumed a fox demon's cultivation. The higher one's realm was, the greater the losses. So, Li Gu never imagined that the nine-tailed demon fox Su Yan would unhesitatingly damage her own realm on the first night and secretly create a knot of heart between the two of them. As the saying goes, husband and wife form a knot of heart, This could be regarded as a gift that a fox demon gave to its loved one. It was greatly beneficial to one's cultivation. So Li Ji's unstable sword heart symptoms naturally disappeared after night. But if love gave birth to hate, then the knot of heart would become a shackle that bound the two together. They would live and die together. Who? An invisible flame suddenly appeared. It wrapped around Li Ge. He looked up, shock and anger in his eyes. Shua! He unsheathed his sword. Boundless sword intent broke out from his body, covering his entire body and temporarily isolating the absolute demonic flame outside. But his complexion still paled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Beads of sweat covered his forehead. Li Ge could use the sword in his hand to temporarily block the absolute demonic flame, but he couldn't cut through it. The burning pain from the nine-tailed demon fox passed through his body and directly affected his soul. Concentric knot. Li Ruhua's complexion changed. She looked at Li Ge. After a moment of shock, there was a deep disappointment. The future sword immortal of the Li family, someone with unparalleled talent, was only at this level. He had been tricked by a mere fox demon and didn't even know it. How laughable! But she couldn't just watch as Li Ge was destroyed. Otherwise, even if she had ample reason, she would lose face in the clan. To become a leader, protecting incompetent clansmen was one of the most important tests. The nine-tailed demon fox writhed in pain. Her 9 limbs were burned to a bloody pulp. Her incomparably large tails wildly swept around, creating thunderous explosions. The luxurious and exquisite Li family residence was instantly destroyed, turning into a complete mess. Countless pieces of broken wood and rubble were wrapped in a terrifying power. They flew through the air at an astonishing speed, crashing in all directions. Foxes were intelligent, but they weren't as stupid as Lord Min said. Otherwise, the nine-tailed demon fox, Su Yen, wouldn't have sacrificed her own cultivation and created a knot of heart to guard against any mishaps. Now, what she needed to do was to make a bigger commotion and alarm the Western Wilderness's Great Formation. If she died, Li Ge would die as well. She would force the Li family of the Middle Wilderness to act and save their lives. Rumble, a deep rumble came from the sky. A whirlpool appeared out of nowhere, covering the entire Li family's residence within a radius of 100 miles. This was the Western Wilderness's Fate Great Formation. It was a terrifying formation that could withstand the nether whirlpool of an Emperor Realm expert. It was so large that even the capital region was covered within. What appeared now was only a small portion of the formation's power, perhaps less than 1%. But even so, the destructive aura released by the whirlpool still froze time and space where the Li family was. Li Zicheng took a deep breath. He moved into the air and looked up at the whirlpool. My Wutong County's Li family is here. Who dares? The sky-bearing king was expressionless. Ancestor Li, it was your Li family who first violated the contract between the Li family and the Emperor clan. Move, or I will use the crime of threatening the imperial capital and activate more of the whirlpool's power to kill you as well. Li Zicheng was enraged. His peak sovereign cultivation broke out of his body. The shadow of an ancient parasol tree appeared above his head. His already powerful aura rose even further. The sky-bearing king narrowed his eyes, his expression cold. He didn't wait for His Majesty's order to stop. Making a move against the Li family's ancestor would be troublesome. But as His Majesty's confidant, the sky-bearing king had no choice. Even if he knew there would be endless trouble, he could only grit his teeth and endure. He couldn't show the slightest bit of hesitation or resistance. His Majesty observed people in the details. Otherwise, even if he killed the Li family's ancestor today, he wouldn't be of any merit in His Majesty's heart. He might even be alienated and abandoned. In the end, he would be thrown out as a scapegoat. Taking a deep breath, the sky-bearing king raised his hand. A token appeared in his palm. It was the size of a palm and was engraved on its surface. The image of a whirlpool was vivid and lifelike, as if it was spinning slowly. Rumble! As the token appeared, the whirlpool above the Li family's residence expanded crazily. In the blink of an eye, it was 1,000 miles wide. The core area became as black as ink. It was like a giant mouth that could swallow everything in the world. Li Zicheng's face was ashen. He couldn't help but reveal shock in the depths of his eyes. Firstly, the whirlpool formation in the western wasteland imperial capital was stronger than he had imagined. Secondly, the Western Wasteland Empire really had the intention to kill him. But now, the one dragged down by the nine-tailed demon fox was the little ancestor of the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture, Liga. If he died, even if Li Zicheng had 100 mouths, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. Once he was blamed by the main family, his future path towards the Great Tao would be completely severed. With the current situation, he couldn't back down. Li Zicheng, come back. A calm voice suddenly rang out. Looking at Li Ruhua flying in the air, Li Zicheng relaxed a little. He respectfully called her little ancestor and flew behind her with his head lowered. At this moment, countless eyes gathered on Li Ruhua's body. Looking at her beautiful and dignified face, there was shock in their eyes. Li Ruhua looked at the sky-bearing king, whose expression was as cold as stone. Then, she looked up at the whirlpool formation in the sky. Central Wasteland, Li family's third-generation disciple Li Ruhua greets Your Majesty. After a moment of silence, the great emperor's calm voice rang out from the whirlpool. The Central Wasteland, Li family's fame has spread far and wide. I have admired you for a long time, but I never thought I would see you today. Li Ruhua bowed. Your Majesty praises me too much. I came to the imperial capital with no intention of harming the Western Wasteland. I ask that Your Majesty save my family member. The whirlpool formation was calm. It was clear that the great emperor wasn't satisfied with her explanation. Li Ruhua took a deep breath. We will give Your Majesty an explanation for this matter. Also, the Li family owes the Western Wasteland a favor. But within the whirlpool formation, the great emperor's voice rang out. In the next moment, a boundless aura gathered. Shua! Like a bolt of lightning, it pierced through the void and crashed into the body of the nine-tailed demon fox. It emitted a cry of despair. Its massive monster body was split in half, and its eyes dimmed as all signs of life were severed. Rumble, rumble. The monster body fell to the ground, instantly destroying half of the Li residence. With Li Ruhua's boundary, she could only barely catch a glimpse of that flash of light, a sword that suppressed the destiny of the imperial capital. It had been baptized by incense, nurtured, and was the true divine artifact of the Western Wasteland Empire. Only like this could it slay the nine-tailed demon fox, sever the knot of love, and save Li Ji's life. But it was only enough to save his life. Puff! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Li Ge staggered. Blood seeped out from every orifice of his head. The sword in his hand had been broken in half. The cut was incomparably smooth, exactly the same as the nine-tailed demon fox's. The man was alive, and the sword was broken to use a sword cultivator's sword to exchange for his life. Although he was indeed alive, from a certain perspective, he was also dead. Li Zicheng's complexion paled. Deep in his eyes there was a trace of fear. He never thought that after the two little ancestors had revealed their identities, the Western Wasteland Great Emperor would still dare to deal such a heavy blow. The demon fox is dead, Li Ge is alive. I am a man of my word. Now, I will wait for your Li family to give me an explanation. Above his head, the terrifying whirlpool formation that covered 1,000 miles slowly vanished from sight. Chapter 1591. Imperial Palace, Long Life Temple. The great emperor's face was gloomy. He stepped forwards and vanished from sight. In the next moment, he appeared in the imperial palace's inner treasury. There was still a sharp aura in the air that hadn't yet dispersed. It was like a heaven-splitting sword that could cut apart everything in the world, severing all life from within. The fourth claws were now sitting cross-legged, their faces pale and their bodies covered in fine cracks. They opened their eyes and struggled to stand up. "Your Majesty." The great emperor waved his hand. "Just wait and heal." He took several steps forward. His gaze fell onto the depths of the inner treasury, onto the broken lotus flower that only had a few green lotus leaves left. A sword mark was sealed in space by the inner treasury's restrictions. It was less than a foot away from the lotus flower. Looking at this sword mark, the great emperor frowned. His eyes grew colder and colder. Everything that had happened before, even if it was all laid out in front of him, he hadn't believed it in the least. But this sword strike was decisive, and decisive. That clan was indeed that group of people that had lost their ancestral name, that group of pitiful and hateful people without a country or home. In the inner treasury, this precious lotus flower that was placed in the open wasn't as simple as it seemed. How did they know this? One of the four old men respectfully said, "Your Majesty, that person only slashed out a single sword strike. Without waiting for the palace's restrictions to be released, he directly blew himself up. We locked away his flesh and blood, but we didn't receive any information or guidance. It was as if what died was only his body, and his soul was nowhere to be found." The great emperor flicked his sleeves. The lotus flower that had taken root in the inner treasury vanished. "I already know." Before, when his consciousness had descended into the great vortex array, the great emperor had sensed the changes that occurred in the inner treasury and thus slashed out with his sword. The central wasteland divine prefectures, Li family, colluded with that clan. No matter how both sides used each other, no matter how many twists and turns there were in the dark, this was an indisputable fact. Thus, the great emperor's sword strike had directly crippled Li Ijo. Although he had spared his life, for a sword cultivator, having their sword path severed was a fate worse than death. This was the great emperor's coldest and cruelest warning to the central wasteland Li family. However, he still decided to wait a little longer and take another look. In a civilian residence, old Master Min, who was watching from the sidelines, revealed a bitter smile. He knew that this matter would not end so easily. That madam really hadn't forgotten about him. Now that she had spoken, of course, he didn't dare to refuse. It wasn't just because he had personally experienced that madam's terrifying aura. More importantly, through this incident, old Master Min had discovered something that made his heart palpitate. That madam had probably seen through his background. Otherwise, she would not have asked him to do this on her own. Bitter, bitter. Old Master Min sighed. He closed his eyes and opened them again. His eyes instantly turned golden. His pupils narrowed, ice-cold to the extreme. He instantly pierced through the obstruction of space, landing on the Li family residence that was mostly in ruins. The corpse of the nine-tailed demon fox, which had been cut in two and had lost all signs of life, instantly turned into a true corpse. Nothing remained. Two balls of white great fey essence, chi, slowly condensed in front of him. Old Master Min waved his sleeves, and they suddenly trembled and disappeared. Zhongwu Marquis Estate. Little Meat nodded in satisfaction. She had succeeded. She had done a good job. Although there were still a few tricks left, they were very stable. Unless that old fellow wanted to die, he should have known how to speak. After enduring for so long, it was time for Qinyu to make a breakthrough. At this time, the imperial capital's great vortex array was activated and the kingdom-stabilizing sword was used as well. Like raging waves after the raging waves rose up, there were still ripples on the sea surface. Since his aura hadn't stabilized yet, he could make use of this. Shua, Midi passed through space and appeared in her seclusion chamber. She glanced at Qinyu, whose entire body was flushed red and his blood vessels bulged to the limit, as if he might explode at any moment. Her lips twitched for a moment before she composed herself. Only those who experience hardship can rise above others. Although these words are a bit old-fashioned and have been a bit common between you and me recently, they aren't wrong at all. But the truth is that what I said isn't wrong at all. Chinyu, you will soon discover that if I gave you a chance to choose again, you would cry and beg me to help you choose again. She rambled on for a long time. It was unknown if she was trying to convince Chinyu or if she was trying to reassure herself. Little Meat lifted a hand and pointed a finger between Chinyu's eyebrows. The opportunity is now. As for how many harvests you can obtain, that will depend on yourself. Ah! A roar erupted from Chinyu's mouth, like a thunderclap. The entire seclusion chamber shook along with it. The aura that had been suppressed by the seal and couldn't find an exit burst forth like a raging river gushing out. Chin, you had been forcefully stopped at the last step. But at the same time that Little Meat undid the seal, he instantly took the final half step and truly stepped into the ruler realm. The ruler of the true divinity path was different from others. At this time, he could feel the countless rules that filled the world. It was like a great net was woven together, and all living beings in the world lived within this grid. Vast, vast, endless. But besides making one instinctively tremble in awe and fear, there was something else that wasn't obvious, but it was like a fishbone stuck in one's throat. Every time one took a breath, it was especially difficult to suppress it. It was like every time one took a breath and then exhaled, there were countless tiny iron spikes that constantly scratched back and forth. Little Meat's eyes brightened. She reached out a hand towards Chinyu, and a drop of clear water flew out on its own. The outline of the little boy was clearly visible within. At this time, he opened his eyes and respectfully bowed. Little Meat was expressionless. She lifted a hand and pointed a finger. Pa! With a light sound, the drop of water shattered on its own. After obtaining his freedom, the little boy's first instinct was to escape into this world. But this thought only appeared for a moment before it was suppressed deep within his heart without hesitation. Little Meat said, "You are smart, so you are still alive. Go. As long as you do your best, I will give you a lucky chance to transform into a human in the future." The little boy was overjoyed. He bowed again and again. Then he turned and stepped out, directly entering between Chinyu's eyebrows, where he turned into a golden mote of light and vanished from sight. Imperial City, Guard Division. Beneath the commander's residence, there was an underground palace hidden 10,000 feet below. The sword that had appeared for a brief moment before had cut down the nine-tailed monster fox and destroyed Li Ji's sword Dao. And now it was here. The sword had no sheath. It was like a feather that floated in the air, motionless. But the moment that the little boy fused into Chinyu's body, there was a clear hum and the sword began to stir once more. Within the underground palace, monstrous sword intent surged into the heavens. From all directions of the western wasteland empire, the infinite power of Joss flames began to gather as if it were boiling. But no matter how carefully this kingdom-guarding divine sword searched, it couldn't detect any abnormalities at all, as if that feeling from before had been nothing but an illusion. The sword slowly shook and finally fell silent. The terrifying sword intent that flooded the underground palace slowly dissipated with it. At this step, only then could it be considered a success. Little Meat let out a breath of relief. If there really had been a problem, she might not have been able to defeat that sword. At that time, she might have been able to save Chinyu, who had become a pile of broken limbs, and then think of a way to revive him. Of course, there was also a chance that she would fail. After all, although that sword's grade was low, it was still a formidable Joss flame artifact. Whatever, since nothing had happened, there was no need to think about these things. Meaty Meaty raised her hand, and 2 balls of white mist appeared in her palm. These were the great monster essence energy that Lord Min had seized from the 9-tailed monster fox. It could be seen as a great divine medicine that could bring the dead back to life. It wouldn't be too much to say that it could regrow flesh and bones. Moreover, the taste wasn't ordinary. After all, it came from the flesh and blood essence of a complete, great monster. She subconsciously licked her lips. Then she clenched her teeth and flicked a finger into Chinyu's body. "Brat, in order to help you, I have done everything in my power. If you wake up and don't know how to be grateful at all, or if you turn into a dog, I really might not be able to bear it and beat you to death." After fusing with the little boy's Joss flame and falling into a half-asleep, half-awake state, Qin Yu seemed to sense something, and his lips twitched. Within the imperial palace, the great emperor who had just left the treasury suddenly looked up towards a certain area in the eastern part of the imperial palace. His thoughts stirred, and a picture scroll appeared in front of him. Faint golden motes of light constantly moved up and down. A part of the picture scroll seemed to have appeared. An invisible pulling force drew in the surrounding golden motes of light, gathering them together and forming a small golden vortex. The vortex in the picture scroll didn't seem too large, but what this picture scroll displayed was the manifestation of the power of Joss flames within the entire Western Wasteland imperial capital. This small golden vortex meant that a massive amount of Joss flame power was being fed back into someone's body, constantly strengthening that person's strength. Who was it? The great emperor lifted a hand and pointed. The vortex rapidly expanded, and faint traces of aura were released from within. A look of surprise appeared on his face. His eyebrows furrowed together, and he began to ponder. Marquis Zhongwu, Ningqin. Not too long ago, he had asked for several treasures, and then announced that he would go into seclusion. Now that he had made a breakthrough, it made sense. It was actually him. Such a large amount of Joss flame power was a sign that he had thoroughly obtained the approval of the destiny of the nation. Could it be that he was wrong? The massive Western Wasteland Empire was a massive divine kingdom. Every social class within the empire was equal to a part of the divine kingdom. In the world of cultivators, all sorts of powerhouses entered the royal court and were bound by the laws of the nation. They were willing to be driven around by the emperor clans. This was naturally because there were benefits to be gained. It wasn't just their status as an official. They wouldn't have to worry about anyone making things difficult for them. More importantly, it was the support of the destiny of the nation, or, to use a more accurate description, the gift of Joss flames. Before, it was said that as an official of the empire, the seal in their hands was the transit point for the Joss flame power. Although the vast majority of the Joss flames would be transferred away, an extremely small portion would be absorbed by the cultivator and used to accelerate their cultivation. It wasn't much, but over the years it was still a considerable amount. In addition, when a cultivator made a breakthrough, if they were loyal enough, they would obtain the recognition of the nation's destiny and receive Joss flames as a feedback. This was what happened when Qin Yu broke into the ruler realm. Of course, although the Joss flames were good, it depended on how much the cultivator themselves could draw. And even if the Joss flames gathered, they might not be able to swallow it all. As the saying goes, how much you eat or how little you eat ultimately depended on your appetite. Thus, the two great monster essence energy that Lord Min condensed had a place to use them. Chapter 1592. Today, after a short period of uproar and excitement, the imperial capital fell into shock and astonishment once more. Many pairs of eyes looked up from the mansions towards the Zhongwu Marquis residence. As important ministers of the Western Wasteland Empire, they were truly loyal to the empire. Although they couldn't directly see the golden Joss flame vortex appear, they could still feel the Joss flame power flowing into Zhongwu Marquis Manor. The amount was inconceivable. No one imagined that Zhongwu Marquis Ningqin, a native of the Broken World, would be so loyal to the empire not long after entering the Western Wasteland. But Joss flames wouldn't lie. Today's scene was the best evidence. Besides shock, there was also a deep sense of envy. As important ministers of the empire, they had personally experienced the benefits of Joss flames to their cultivation. Zhongwu Marquis Ningqin had obtained a great good fortune. Although he had only broken into the sovereign realm, his true cultivation after leaving seclusion couldn't be compared to an ordinary early sovereign realm. Not to mention these important ministers of the Western Wasteland. Even His Majesty couldn't help but reveal a solemn expression. He doubted his own judgment once more, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, the great emperor composed himself. Go. I have always kept my promise to the emperor family and have never disturbed that old mister. But today it was old mister who broke the rules first. I have to ask what exactly is going on. From the shadows, the young eunuch's figure appeared. He bowed, "Yes, your majesty." He turned and vanished from sight. Li family residence. Li Gu had fallen unconscious. His entire body was bathed in blood and his breathing was close to non-existent. Although his life was saved, his sword Dao had been severed. He was now a cripple. Li Zicheng drew back his finger. He stood up and cupped his hands together. Second miss, rest assured. I have already fed little ancestor Li Gu a 9 revolution pill. His condition has stabilized. Li Ruhua remained expressionless. I understand. You leave first. Li Zicheng respectfully nodded. He took several steps back and left. As the door closed, Li Gu opened his eyes. They were dim and gloomy. I'm not going back. Li Ruhua frowned. If you return to the clan with the cultivation of the elders, they might be able to help you repair your damaged sword Dao. Li Gu shook his head. The slightest movement affected his injuries. He violently coughed and blood dripped from his nose and mouth, making him look miserable. However, his eyes were still calm, and there was a hint of ridicule in the depths of that calmness. Second miss, it's not like we haven't seen the attitude of the elders in the clan before. Why do you have to say these words to comfort me? If it was just ordinary injuries, even if they were on the verge of death, a few treasures from the clan would be enough to reverse the situation. But now, the Western Wasteland Grand Emperor used his nation-guarding sword to directly sever my sword Dao, the power of a Joss Flame artifact. I'm afraid I'll need at least one sword cultivator elder from my clan to help me recultivate my sword Dao at the cost of sacrificing a great deal of his life sword essence. Li Ji's eyes dimmed. Second miss, do you think that the clan will be willing to bear such a heavy price to save me? Even if the clan was willing, which sword cultivator elder would be willing to sacrifice for me? Or are you talking about my parents? The mockery in the depths of his eyes could no longer be concealed. It was laid bare in front of Li Ruhua. Li Ruhua, who knew some inside information, became even calmer. What do you want? To leave the Li family. Li Gu looked at her. You should know that if I want to cultivate the sword Dao again, this is my only choice. Otherwise, after I return to the Central Wasteland, I can only be a cripple raised by the clan. I will be a disgrace to the clan, a piece of trash that brings shame to the clan until I die of old age. This is not the path I want to take, so, second miss, I beg of you, help me. Li Ruhua hesitated for a moment. She looked at him and nodded. Okay. She turned and left. Li Zicheng had received the news and was waiting outside with a frown. Second miss, Marquis Zhongwu has broken through, but the situation has changed again. Li Ruhua furrowed her eyebrows. Bad news came one after another. Li Zhangzhou's death seemed to be a trap. Old Master Min sighed. His eyes occasionally swept over where Marquis Zhongwu's manor was. He felt so pained that he couldn't breathe. This was the essence energy of a 9-tailed monster fox. He hadn't even had time to eat a single bite before he had handed it all over. Now, the more he looked at it, the more he felt as if a knife was cutting into his heart. He could only use drinking to numb his heart. But even if he drank to drown his sorrows, he still felt uncomfortable. Old Master Min sighed. He casually tossed the wine cup onto the table and rubbed his temples. Little fellow, it's been many years since we've seen each other. Since you've come, then come in. Somewhere in the courtyard, a shadow twisted and a young eunuch walked out. He bowed and said, This servant greets, old Mr. Min. Old Master Min looked at him and sighed. According to your status, this person should call you uncle. There's no need to humiliate yourself like this. The young eunuch had a calm expression. A crippled person is naturally a servant of the heavenly family. The past is nothing but smoke and clouds. Old Master Min humphed. It's good that you can convince yourself. There is no need to tell me. He rapped the table. Would you like to sit down and have a drink? He didn't care at all that the table in front of him was a mess. It was disrespectful to ask someone to drink. The young eunuch bowed. Thank you, old Mr. Min, for your kindness. But I carry the imperial decree on my shoulders. I don't dare to be greedy. From his expression, one could see that he was genuinely happy and regretful. As a special figure in the palace, the young eunuch knew more about this old man than others. Of course, he knew that to be invited to drink with him, let alone leftovers, even throwing a cup of wine at his feet was a great honor. Fine. If you don't want to drink, then let's talk business. Old Master Min looked at him. Did you come for the 9-tailed monster fox? The young eunuch bowed. His Majesty wants to know why old Mr. Min made an exception and destroyed the peace of 1,000 years. Old Master Min sneered inwardly. Of course, it was because of the terrifying Madam of Zhongwu Marquis Manor, someone who left him in despair. Of course, he wouldn't say this out loud, because the longer he lived, the more he cherished his life. He didn't want to commit suicide. Go back and tell the Western Wasteland Great Emperor that the reason I intervened was because I didn't want to be sucked into the maelstrom. That is all. His Majesty should be able to figure out for himself. The young eunuch bowed. Yes, thank you, old man Min. I will take my leave. He stepped into the shadows, disappearing from sight. Looking at the wine cup on the table, he hesitated for a moment. Then he picked it up and poured himself another cup of wine. With a slurp, he drank it all in one gulp. The gloominess in his heart eased a little. This was because what he said was the truth. As for what the Western Wasteland Great Emperor thought, that was his own problem. It had nothing to do with him. Hee, this old man is indeed smart. The young eunuch brought back old Master Min's words. Behind the 9 layers of bead curtains, a cold light appeared in the eyes of the great emperor. It was true. As expected, that clan had joined forces with the Central Wasteland family. They were using each other. He thought about the highest level of secret information that had been sent back from the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture in recent days. The great emperor vaguely grasped a few clues, and that clan was originally from the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture. Their ancestors had a close relationship with the Li family, and they belonged to the same faction. It wasn't difficult for them to cooperate with each other on the basis of prerequisites. That sword strike in the Imperial Palace was that clan's true goal. Targeting the loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin was only a pretense. As for the Li family, they should be cooperating with that clan in order to search for something, or rather, a person. This was something that the spies placed in the other wasteland regions had sent back. This was proof of this. Pass down a decree to the sky-bearing Heavenly King. Tell the Li family that I am still waiting for their explanation. A sharp light flashed in the great emperor's eyes. Qin Yu opened his eyes. He took a deep breath and then let it out. An unprecedented strength and an unprecedented suppression. These two contradictory feelings wove together in his heart, causing his complexion to become a bit complex. Before breaking into the ruler realm, he never imagined that he would face such a situation, and just how should he proceed on the great Tao in front of him? If a ruler was like this, then what about the emperor realm? Would he be crushed before he could make a breakthrough? Would his bones break and his tendons snap, causing him to perish? Meaty coldly sneered. You haven't even eaten your fill yet, and you already want to hold on? Little Qin Yu, although a cultivator cannot lack something like a sense of crisis, aren't you a bit too far ahead of your time? She paused for a moment, her tone even colder. Even if the sky falls down, there is someone tall enough to hold it up. Moreover, when cultivators defy the heavens and change their fate, they have to take things one step at a time. There is no need to think about the future right now. Her last words seemed a bit like she was trying to cover something up. Meaty wasn't a patient person. She would explain things to others and comfort them. Chinyu glanced at her, a thoughtful look on his face. This glance caused Meaty to grit her teeth. You've made a breakthrough in your boundary, and your mind is much better. Then you should be aware that some common words spoken on the street are also very reasonable. In addition to these words, it was a clear reminder. Chinyu faintly smiled. He cupped his hands together and said, "Only by experiencing the most bitter of hardships can one rise above others. I understand." Humph! Meaty couldn't bear to see him like this, and was especially dissatisfied with herself. She turned and tossed out something. "I've finished refining it, but it is mine now. I'm renting it to you. You only have temporary use of it, so don't break it." Chinyu reached out and caught it. His eyes brightened and his smile widened. I know. If I break it, there will be great trouble, right?" Chinyu looked down at the little thing in his hand, and a look of praise appeared in his eyes. He looked up and sincerely said, "Good skill." Meaty's complexion improved a little. She humphed and said, "Of course, since I'm the one who made it, it must be the best." She yawned. "You can understand what is happening outside by yourself. I'm a bit tired, so don't bother me if there's nothing important." Schwa! She turned and left, vanishing into thin air. Chinyu had long since become accustomed to Meaty's supernatural abilities. He flicked his finger and a drop of blood flew out, fusing into the thing in his hand. The thing trembled and its jelly-like body softened and melted. It rapidly spread outwards, covering Chinyu from head to toe. With a thought, it turned into a white robe. He reached out and pinched the robe's texture. Chinyu became increasingly satisfied. This was good stuff. With this robe in addition to his own incomparably powerful mortal body, he would be able to catch up to his current strange boundary in terms of defense, the initial boundary of a ruler, but it was a completely different initial boundary from others. Chapter 1593. As he twirled his white robes, he thought about his own boundary. He always felt that using the words initial realm to describe his current state was a bit too much of a bully. Forget it. In any case, anyone that ran over to be bullied by him on their own initiative definitely wasn't a good person. At that time, he would be pleasantly surprised. Chinyu sat down cross-legged and began to carefully sense his current state after his breakthrough. First was the ruler realm of the true divinity realm, or it could be called the realm of perception. To say that this was a name he came up with was a bit inappropriate. This was because after Chinyu broke through, this name had subconsciously popped up in his mind. Sensing the world, one would know how vast and boundless it was. One would also have to withstand the suppression of the world itself. The world was like a great net. All life in the world, no matter how strong or weak they were all within it. Just thinking about it made one feel stifled to the extreme. Then, an instinctive fear rose up in one's heart. Chinyu decisively suppressed these thoughts, no longer tangling himself in this matter. His intuition told him that there might be unknown dangers if he oversensed the world's great net. Besides himself, the other matter was the little boy Jossflame. Chinyu could feel its existence. It was one with him. But this one with him wasn't completely appropriate. It had fused into Chinyu's body, but it wasn't in his body. It was more like it had fused into a different dimension. In this dimension, no matter where Chinyu was, he was one with the little boy Jossflame. As for the specifics, it was hard for Chinyu to explain. He could only faintly guess that the little boy Jossflame had hidden himself in the Western Wasteland Empire's Jossflame Dowrite. Jossflame Dowrite, just what was that? He clearly didn't have any impression of it. So how did he immediately think of it? Chinyu rubbed the point between his eyebrows. He only thought of it as a side effect of sensing the world after breaking into the ruler realm, so he didn't think too deeply about it. After confirming that the little boy Jossflame was well hidden in the Western Wasteland Empire's large Jossflame Dowrite, and that there was no danger of it being exposed, Chinyu was even more satisfied with Little Meat's reliability. The second matter was that Qin Yu would inherit the throne and become the new Goliath Empress. The Goliath bloodline in his body had been subtly influencing him, constantly increasing the intensity of his mortal body. Afterwards, he continued to freeload and freeload, accelerating this process. Finally, as Qin Yu broke through his boundary, he experienced his first obvious transformation. As for the specific range of improvement, it was within the western wasteland imperial capital. Unless Qin was courting death, he wouldn't try using the abilities of the Goliath bloodline. Therefore, this could only be tested in the future. The third matter was also the one that gave Qin Yu the most pleasant surprise. The darkness in front of him had finally been broken. And this was the turning point that Little Meaty had mentioned before, the one that would allow Qin Yu to make a breakthrough. This was also another important reason why he had been able to attract an endless amount of Joss Flame power. Otherwise, did they really think that a Joss Flame boy who had just successfully smuggled into the country could have such a strong ability? The darkness in front of him was broken, and the soul seed truly sprouted. The gift that Qin Yu obtained from the heavens and earth rose with it. At the same time, it offset a part of the suppression that came from the world. Otherwise, the true God Path's sovereign realm, which was also known as the perception realm, was definitely not something that could be broken through so easily. In other words, even if one was lucky enough to break through, the consequences would be hard to predict. This couldn't help but give rise to some extremely dark and dangerous thoughts. For example, the path of the true divinity. Perhaps there had been people who had walked it before. It was just that their luck wasn't as good as Qin Yu's. Thus, after they made their breakthroughs, because they sensed the world, they encountered an extremely terrifying fate. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it was. A moment later, Qin Yu took a deep breath, flicked his sleeves, and left. Little Meaty had mentioned before that cultivators defied the heavens. To change one's fate, one had to advance step by step. It wasn't good to think too much ahead of time. Priceless advice naturally had to be learned and used. Before she left, she specifically reminded Qin Yu to understand what was happening outside with Qin Yu's understanding of her. This was her way of asking for credit. Qin Yu was indeed curious as to just what had happened during this period of time. Little Meaty said she was going to rest, but the truth was that she wasn't truly resting. She first warned the old monster in the house, telling him to be a good monster and not court death. Otherwise, she would be skilled at frying, roasting, and frying him. Then, she arrived at a sealed residence in the imperial capital's Longhorn Alley. A white-robed, sword cultivator woman lived here with a dispirited man who had changed into a new set of clothes. "Greetings, my lord." The white-robed woman respectfully bowed. Her eyes were blazing hot and filled with endless reverence. Her attitude was completely different from before. That sword strike in the imperial palace had been slashed out by the white-robed woman. The dispirited man had also used his strength to temporarily lend her a set of clothes. This matter was far more difficult than changing one's own clothes. Moreover, there were many restrictions. So, after his clothes were destroyed, he was completely dispirited, unable to raise his spirits at all. Little Meaty glanced at the dispirited man who was following behind the white-robed, sword woman. She sneered and said, "This trouble was all because of you. You only put in a little bit of effort, and yet you still want to take credit for it? Or should I reward you with a great opportunity to offset your contribution this time, and then I'll settle this bad debt with you?" Iron Wire shivered. He didn't dare to play around any longer. His face paled and sweat streamed down his face. "Madam, please calm your anger. I was wrong." Thump, thump. He kowtowed without the slightest bit of hesitation, nor did he make any excuses. His intuition told him that the madam in front of him wasn't in a good mood right now. If he dared to play any more tricks, he might really die. "Humph!" Little Meaty coldly sneered. She turned and sat down. The white-robed sword woman stepped forward and poured a cup of tea for her. She respectfully said, My lord, what are your orders? Little Meaty glanced at her. Take off your white robes. The white-robed sword woman moved without hesitation. Whoosh! Iron Wire turned and ran. In the blink of an eye, he rushed out of the living room and hid far away, not daring to look back. Little Meaty's lips twitched. This bastard's reaction was quite fast. He wanted to borrow someone's sword to kill them and eat a delicious meal. After all, he had lived for such a long time, so the flesh of his body should be quite good. Her white robes fell to the ground, revealing a face. Perhaps because she had weathered the storms of the sea all year round. Her skin was a bit rough, but this didn't affect her beauty at all. Rather, it made her seem a bit more heroic than ordinary female cultivators. When combined with her icy cold face, she was particularly captivating, especially for some men who had that sort of thing in their bones. They had low resistance towards this type of woman. Little Meaty looked up and down several times. Her eyes lingered on her chest and thighs, and she couldn't help but curl her lips. All right, put it on. From now on, without my permission, you are not allowed to casually take off this white robe. Yes, my lord. She respectfully bowed and put on the white robes. She didn't feel offended, nor did she ask for the reason. Little Meaty picked up the teacup and took 2 sips. Then she casually placed it down and tapped the table. What is your name? Baiji. Very good. From now on, you are my servant girl. Baiji knelt to the ground, her eyes bright. Yes, my lord. The 9 regions of the Great Desolate were divided into 5 regions and 4 regions. The Central Desolate and the 4 regions were the most powerful. The remaining Desolate region was second. But in the upper 5 regions, the Central Desolate was the leader. This was not only because it had a vast territory that far surpassed the other desolate regions, but also because of its heaven-bestowed status. The Central Desolate was the core of the great desolate world. It was loved and blessed by the heavens and earth. It possessed the most abundant heaven and earth, spiritual strength, and the most complete rules of the world. Because of this, all the great monsters in the world were born in the Central Desolate. This was because the structure of the world in the other desolate regions did not have a foundation for the birth of great monsters. Because of this, the Central Desolate was also named the Divine Prefecture. The Qin clan ruled over the Divine Prefecture. Since ancient times, their inheritance had been passed down through hundreds of emperors, and there had never been any mistakes. The Qin clan was gifted with the power of an emperor, and their bloodline was loved by the world. But more importantly, it was said that the Central Desolate Divine Prefecture ruled by the Qin clan had a powerhouse protecting its destiny, allowing it to exist for all eternity. Because of this, countless great clans in the Central Desolate Divine Prefecture obeyed the orders of the Qin clan. No one dared to rebel. At the very least, they did not dare to show it on the surface. As for whether they coveted it in secret, there was no doubt. Ruling over the Central Desolate Divine Prefecture and becoming a clan favored by the heavens and earth would bring endless fortune to their descendants. There were many things that would make anyone's eyes turn red. For example, other than the Qin clan, there were the Zhao, Su, Li, and Tian clans, as well as the sky-connecting, Dao Origin, Dark Marsh, and Limitless realms. The Heavenly Sea realm was where the Li clan was based. It was an ancient god's cave dwelling that was later obtained by the Li clan's ancestor. Generations of Li clan continued to expand and repair it, causing this small world to be as large as half a country. It also had a monstrous array that absorbed the vast heaven and earth spiritual strength, turning it into a land of immortals. Now, in the Heavenly Sea realm, beside the Li clan's ancestral shrine, in a seemingly unremarkable hall, there were several figures standing silently. There was not the slightest aura being emitted, but just these few figures standing there were like divine pillars that could stabilize the sea, suppressing all things. Ghosts and gods couldn't get close, and heaven and earth couldn't spy on them. Something unexpected has happened in the Western Desolation. Someone seems to have set up a trap in advance, luring Li Ruhua and Li Gu into it and causing them to clash with the Western Desolation's sovereign clan. Li Gu was implicated by the nine-tailed demon fox, and because of the concentric knot, his sword Dao was severed by the great emperor of Western Wilderness, and he died a few days ago. One of them spoke with a calm voice. When he mentioned these matters, there was no fluctuation in his voice at all. The rest of the people in the hall were all silent, as if they were thinking about this matter, but also as if they were daydreaming and didn't care at all. Today, we have gathered here because Li Ruhua has sent a message back to her clan, saying that she will try to cooperate with the Western Barren Lands to find the whereabouts of the Barren Sovereign. She doesn't dare to act on her own. She wants us to give her a reply as soon as possible, joining hands with the Western Wilderness. What will the 13th Tower think of this? The people upstairs didn't prohibit it. According to the rules of the 13th floor, it's fine as long as it's not prohibited. I have no objections. The person who spoke first swept his gaze across the surroundings. Since that's the case, I will send a message to Li Ruhua, telling her to act according to her discretion. In the hall, one figure after another rapidly faded and disappeared. It turned out that those people with terrifying auras that could suppress the heavens and earth had not come in person. They were just divine sense projections that had traversed an unknown distance to arrive at the ancestral shrine. Li Gu had died. A potential sword immortal of a clan that was highly regarded and nurtured should have been a major event. But to the leaders of these clans, existences that stood at the peak of the world, it was insignificant. They had lived for far too long. Over the endless years, they had seen countless so-called geniuses and people with limitless futures. But in the end, they had grown up and entered their ranks. Not even 1 in 10 million could stand on equal footing with them. Death was death. In this vast world, everyone was caught in a net. Who could survive for eternity? Chapter 1594. Second Miss, the Western Wilderness is too much. Li Zicheng roared, his face full of anger. Now, the sky-bearing king was waiting outside, demanding an explanation from the Li family. Of course, Li Zicheng's mind was in a mess, but the real reason was not because of the emperor's overbearing attitude. Li Gu was dead, but he had personally checked and given Li Gu the 9 transformation pill. Li Ji's condition had stabilized. Furthermore, most importantly, Li Zicheng had not been able to see Li Ji's corpse. But this was said by Li Ruhua herself. No matter how shocked and confused he was, he could only suppress it in his heart. But in the depths of his mind, countless images of swords and blades flashed past. The main family of the Middle Wilderness was not united. After all, they had many branches and many descendants. It was normal for them to be close and distant. Who knew what kind of danger was hidden in this matter? Anyway, Li Ji's death could not be hidden. If the main family was willing to investigate, he would act according to the situation. Otherwise, of course, he would play dumb and pretend nothing had happened. So, Li Zicheng taking the chance to vent his anger was fake. Hiding his emotions was real. Li Ruhua looked at him, her expression calm. Go tell the sky-bearing king that I am waiting for a reply from the family. Then, I will enter the palace and personally pay a visit to the Western Wilderness Emperor. Her expression did not change at all, but it was like an invisible blade that cut off the possibility of Li Zicheng using the main family to break through to the great Tao. If he had chosen to say something, or if he had expressed his opinion, this matter would have had a completely different ending. Everything in the world was a matter of choice. People did not know. Li Zicheng, who did not know anything, respectfully bowed and left. He went to deal with the sky-bearing king, heaving a sigh of relief. He was indeed worried that Li Ruhua would hint something to him, asking him to express his stance or make some plans to drag him down with her. Luckily, such a thing did not happen. Half of the Li family's mansion had been destroyed in the chaos. The guest hall was cleaned in a hurry. The sky-bearing king heard the explanation and frowned. He stood up. His Majesty is not in a good mood. I hope Ancestor Li can hurry him. I will take my leave first. Li Zicheng's expression was indifferent. Goodbye. Before, under the whirlpool array, the sky-bearing king gritted his teeth and wanted to kill him. It was unavoidable. The sky-bearing king was expressionless, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. His Majesty's way of doing things was still unpredictable. Luckily, he was promoted by His Majesty and they were in the same boat. Offending the Li family. There would be many changes in the future, but he could not care about it now. He hurried into the palace and reported the reply. The 9th Heaven Great Emperor sneered, "Hurry up again!" He felt cold and bloodthirsty, and said, "Emperor, the King of Qin." Emperor, Wilderness Emperor, King, Chen. As he walked quickly, sweat broke out on his forehead. It seemed that this time His Majesty was really angry. He walked quickly with sweat. And, most likely, the Li clan had offended His Majesty. Even if they were a famous clan of the central, desolate, divine prefecture, they would still have to pay the price. After leaving and returning, the atmosphere in the Li residence was extremely heavy. The air was almost frozen. Opposite him, Li Zicheng's old face was so dark that it looked like it was about to rain. Now, this Li family ancestor, who had been in seclusion for many years, was really annoyed. So what if it was Imperial Zhou? The emperor's bloodline needed to add the word Li to the surname. Could it be that the emperor had forgotten about Imperial Zhou? Sky-bearing King, please return. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted. Li Zicheng turned and bowed. Little ancestor. Li Ruhua said, Sky-bearing King, I will go with you to see the emperor. Li Ruhua said, Sky-bearing King, I will go with you to see the emperor. Thank you for Miss Li's understanding. His Majesty has been waiting for a long time. The Sky-bearing King cupped his hands, showing enough respect for this third-generation disciple of the Li family. Li Zicheng stepped forward, but was interrupted by Li Ruhua. You stay here. Yes. They left the house. The carriage was already waiting outside. Li Ruhua pushed the door open and entered. She leaned on the couch, her expression calm. Qin Shanglu hesitated. Miss Li, why did you bring me? Li Ruhua glanced at him. Don't worry. Even if I want to sell you, you're too small. There's no need to do anything. Qin Shanglu was not angry, I know. That's why I don't understand. Li Ruhua waved her hand. Just think of it as me dragging you along to relieve my boredom. I was bored during the journey, so I dragged you along to talk. Qin Shanglu suddenly asked, Miss Li, are you nervous? Li Ruhua looked at him, her eyes indifferent. You are very smart. Yes, I am a bit nervous because I have to make a decision after entering the imperial palace. It might decide my future. Qin Shanglu said, At such a time you should be nervous. Otherwise, it would be too disrespectful to the choice. What can I do for you, Miss Li? As long as you ask, I will agree. Li Ruhua smiled. Qin Shanglu, were you always this smart, or did you become enlightened after suffering a setback? Qin Shanglu thought about it, probably because I was always smart. Li Ruhua's smile widened. She closed her eyes and leaned back on the soft couch. I have a headache. Come and give me a massage. Qin Shanglu did not hesitate. He got up and sat on the ground, his fingers intertwining with her black hair. The carriage fell into silence until they arrived at the imperial palace. Li Ruhua opened her eyes, got up and pushed the door open. Qin Shanglu followed behind. With the king of Skirich leading the way, the journey was smooth. Soon they arrived at an imperial garden called the Secluded Pavilion. There were all kinds of plants in the garden, blooming with flowers. There were also artificial mountains and pavilions, showing off the nobility of the royal family. The horizontal board with the word Secluded Pavilion was in the garden, under an octagonal pavilion. The person who wrote it was extremely rough, using a splashing technique. The two short characters actually gave off a feeling of endless desolation. Even the blooming flowers in the garden could not offset it. The air was filled with the fragrance of flowers, filled with a trace of coldness. It was not strong, but it penetrated deep into the bones. The emperor of the West Wilderness, a middle-aged man with a white face and beard, was sitting in the secluded pavilion, calmly reading a book in his hand. The king of Skirich stopped far away and bowed. "Your Majesty, Miss Li is here." In the secluded pavilion, the emperor did not look up, only waving his hand. The king of Skirich turned around. "Miss Li, His Majesty invites you in." His eyes fell on the pale Qin Shanglu, who was forcing himself not to show fear. Li Ruhua said lightly, "Stay here and don't go far. I will find you later." Qin Shanglu bowed, watching Li Ruhua walk towards the secluded pavilion. The king of Skirich was expressionless. "Follow me." He turned and left, sneering in his heart. Chun Yuanqin of Guanhai City. He was extremely smart, but in his old age he made many stupid moves. There was indeed a problem in the beginning. The Li family of the Central Wilderness was indeed powerful, but what kind of person was His Majesty? The sword Dao of the Li family's third-generation disciple was directly cut off. Why would he care about anything else? Chun Yuanqin's step had cut off all paths of retreat. The secluded pavilion. Li Ruhua stepped in and bowed respectfully. The third generation of the Li family of the Central Wilderness, Li Ruhua, greets Your Majesty. The emperor looked up, revealing a smile. "Miss Li, no need to be so courteous. I have been urging you again and again, but I feel uneasy. Please come and explain some things." He rapped his fingers on the table, and the servant girls at the side and the eunuchs further away all bowed their heads and retreated outside. Li Ruhua looked up, smiling. "Ruhua is here to give Your Majesty some explanations. Please speak." The emperor smiled, "No rush. The palace's pastries are carefully made by the royal chef. Miss Li, why don't you try some first and see if it tastes better than the Central Wilderness?" Li Ruhua bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She picked one up, putting it in her mouth and chewing. Her smile was like a spring breeze. "The taste is excellent, soft and sweet. Your Majesty's royal chef is indeed good." The emperor smiled. "Since it can satisfy Miss Li, of course I will reward you. But as far as I know, in the early years of the Central Wilderness, there was a youth hall that made pastries that were known as the best in the great wilderness. But for some reason, the inheritance was suddenly cut off. Only some scattered descendants could not learn the skills of the youth hall. Miss Li lives in the Central Wilderness and comes from a noble background. I wonder if you have ever tasted the skills of the youth hall? Tell me." Li Ruhua smiled, taking another bite. She held the pastry in her hand, slowly chewing it as if she was savoring it. The emperor was not in a hurry. He picked up the teacup and took a sip, looking with interest at a blooming flower outside the yew pavilion. Red like fire, blazing like it was burning. The yew pavilion fell into silence. Li Ruhua smiled, but she sighed inwardly. She finally understood why the emperor of the Western Wilderness did not hesitate to cut off Li Ji's swordsmanship. The youth hall of the divine continent of the Central Wasteland was indeed a miraculous existence back then. A small pastry shop with its outstanding craftsmanship had actually opened up in tens of thousands of cities in the Central Wasteland. It was known as the best pastry shop in the world. It wasn't until later that one of the 5 great families of the Central Desolate suddenly erupted and seized that great good fortune. Only then did the people of the world realize that Youth Hall had always been their property. It was a pastry shop, a spy network, and a secret instigator, poisoner, and conspirator. It helped that family to do many things quietly and invisibly. In fact, the Youth Hall could stand out and defeat many competitors in one fell swoop. Under normal circumstances, the Youth Hall would have disappeared, followed a certain family, and become a famous spy agency in the world. However, things didn't progress smoothly. An unforeseen event happened to the great fortune, and they were already removed from the 5 great families of the Central Wasteland. They ended up in a situation where both ends were not good, and they were stuck in a quagmire. It was reasonable for the youth hall to be purged. Countless spies and secret agents were killed without hesitation. Because of this, more than 1 million people died. It was comparable to a medium-sized war in the wilderness. Of course, there were innocent people, but it was better to kill 1,000 innocents than to let one go. Revenge was always bloody and cruel. The emperor of the Western Wilderness suddenly mentioned the youth hall. What he was really referring to was obvious. When he cut off Li Ji's swordsmanship, it was this emperor's cold and tough warning. Chapter 1595. After thinking for a while, Li Ruhua put down the pastry in her hand. She stood up and bowed. Your Majesty, I cannot interfere with some of the decisions of the elders in the clan. I apologize for what happened before. The great emperor narrowed his eyes and smiled. That's it. Li Ruhua raised her head. No, I came to the palace today because I received authorization from the elders to cooperate with your Majesty. Compared to the past, this cooperation is just the beginning. But your Majesty, please believe me. If everything goes well, perhaps we can use this to change the attitudes of the elders in the clan. They might even change their stance and stand on Western Baron's side. The great emperor looked at the blooming red flower in the garden. Who is the Li family looking for? Li Ruhua smiled. I knew it. This cannot be hidden from your Majesty. She looked calm, but inside she was shocked. In the divine continent of Central Baron, this was a top secret. For Western Baron to know, they must have been prepared for many years. Their ambition was not small. Taking a deep breath, Li Ruhua looked up at the great emperor of Western Baron. No one can spy in the Yu prison. Li Ruhua said, We are looking for the new emperor of the Baron race. The great emperor frowned and fell into silence. In the Yu prison, no one could lie to him. Li Ruhua's words were true. Baron race, new emperor. The great emperor easily thought of the earth-shattering war in the barren wasteland recorded in the ceremony of Huang, Zhou's first generation. Besides the divine continent of Central Baron, the rest of the 8 wastelands had been conquered by the Baron race. Most of the countries had suffered heavy casualties. The ancestor of Huang, Zhou, had taken advantage of this. After many bitter battles, he had replaced Huang, Zhou as the ruler of the Western Baron region. It could be said that the calamity that had swept the world was the east wind that had lifted Huang, Zhou's bloodline. The reason for the terrifying war in the Baron Wasteland was because the last Baron Emperor of the Baron race had united all the tribes and unleashed the full power of the Baron race. If it was not for the Central Baron race, who had used a great magical power to kill the Baron Emperor, who had tried to break through to the true Emperor level, the 9 Baron Wastelands would not have existed. It would have become the land of the Baron race. Ever since then, the barbarians suffered a great defeat, and all the barbarian tribes returned to a state of disunity. It was only then that they gradually turned into the current state. But now, a new Berserker Emperor had been born. A cold glint appeared in the Emperor of Western Wasteland's eyes, and the space within the Yu prison almost froze. Li Ruhua's eyes were filled with astonishment. The cultivation of the great emperor of the West Wilderness was so strong. Thinking back to the information he had gathered about the Western Wasteland before entering the Western Wasteland, it seemed that this great emperor really did have the ambition to become the true great emperor of the Western Wasteland. He wanted to be like the Qin family of the Central Wasteland, who seemed to have been passed down for hundreds of generations, but had always been the same person. He wanted to rule the country forever. I have lost my composure. The great emperor spoke slowly. His tone was calm, but his eyes were filled with endless pressure and solemnity. The matter regarding the barbarian sovereign is too important. Even though you've already explained it to me, I still want to confirm it again. On the other side, Li Ruhua said, Rest assured, Your Majesty, the Central Wasteland has made many confirmations regarding the arrival of the new barbarian sovereign. That is why the 13th Tower gave the order. The 4 great clans and the 4 great sects have to send their disciples to investigate this matter. She thought for a moment and said, "Of course, the patriarchs of the various clans and sects really want to do it themselves to ensure that nothing goes wrong. But their realms are too high, so high that they can't move around as they please. Otherwise, it will be very easy to cause trouble." The great emperor nodded to show that he understood. If it wasn't Li Ruhua in front of him today, but a top patriarch of the Li family of the Central Wasteland, the situation would not be like this. In fact, the storm caused by the 9-tailed fox a few days ago had already caused the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. I am willing to cooperate and help the Li family find the barbarian sovereign, but you need to provide all the information regarding the new barbarian sovereign. Li Ruhua said, "Of course." She took out a jade scroll. It was light purple in color and surrounded by a noble aura. With one glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. After the birth of the new barbarian sovereign, the 13th tower automatically sensed it. But for some reason, the heavenly secrets related to the barbarian sovereign were directly disturbed by someone. So we need to be cautious and careful. This jade scroll came from the 13th tower, so it can carry this information. Otherwise, we might alert the enemy. The powerful people in the world could not be called directly by their names, using the Emperor realm as an example. Even if they were billions of miles away, if someone called their true name, they would instantly sense it. They could even use this to lock onto the disrespectful person, to be able to disturb the heavenly secrets of the new barbarian sovereign and make the 13th tower helpless. The strength of that existence could be imagined. Being in the U-Pavilion, the great emperor's own realm could also increase by a level. It was similar to his own domain or holy land. With a glance, he saw through the terrifying, intertwining seals on the jade scroll. He reached out and took it. With a thought, his divine sense entered it. After a long time, the great emperor retracted his divine sense. The purple jade scroll in his hand silently shattered into powder, then faded into nothingness, leaving no trace behind. When the barbarian sovereign descended, his aura was interfered with by an invisible force. It was impossible to lock onto him, so the 13th tower couldn't make an accurate judgment. They could only draw out a few general areas: west of the Western Wasteland, east of the Hungshan Mountains. This barbarian territory was one of the key areas of suspicion. The new barbarian sovereign, the Western barbarian emperor's tomb. At this moment, the Western Wasteland great emperor thought of many things. Countless thoughts collided and tumbled, causing a thoughtful expression to appear on his face. Li Ruhua quietly waited. "I thought of something. It is about an emperor tomb in the Western barbarian territory." The great emperor slowly opened his mouth and looked across. Li Ruhua nodded. "My Li family already knows of this matter, but whether or not the new barbarian sovereign is related to this, no one can be sure. Does your Majesty have a suspect in mind?" The great emperor was silent. A figure appeared in his mind. Li Ruhua hesitated for a moment. Then she said in a soft voice, "Marquis Zhongwu, Ningqin." The great emperor's eyes exploded with sharp light. He didn't need to speak to express his attitude. "So it is like this," Li Ruhua said. "Before this, I investigated information about Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin. Your Majesty seems to be worried about him. I believe that your Majesty wouldn't speak without thinking. Since you have doubts in your heart, there must be another reason." She paused for a moment and took a deep breath. "I won't hide it from your Majesty. The reason I asked about the matter of the Wudong County's Li family juniors being killed was because I sensed some karmic changes that seemed to be related to the new barbarian sovereign. In addition, see Viewing City's Qin Yuanshin's son, Qin Shanglu. I also had a similar or even stronger discovery. And these two matters are both related to Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin, although from what I can see right now, this seems like a carefully arranged trap. Even now, I don't have full confidence that what I sensed is true or false. But when it comes to the new barbarian sovereign, I must be careful." The great emperor was expressionless. After several breaths of silence, he suddenly said, "I once borrowed strength from the heavens to ask Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin. He had no problems." Li Ruhua bowed. "Your Majesty, nothing in this world is absolute. But the heavenly Tao can be deceived. That person in the central desolate, you should know better than me." The great emperor glanced at the gentle Li Ruhua. He closed his eyes and thought for a moment. "I agree to try again, but I must remain calm and collected. Otherwise it will cause a stir in the court." Li Ruhua already knew that when Qin Yu broke into the ruler realm, he had triggered the power of Joss flames. The amount of Joss flames he had absorbed and the amount of time he had lasted was shocking. At this time, it wasn't appropriate to spread news that the imperial palace was suspicious of him. "Your Majesty, rest assured that I am willing to investigate. I guarantee that there will be no accidents." The great emperor nodded. "I will give you this chance." From the very beginning, the Western Wasteland great emperor and the Li family's third generation had a misunderstanding on certain topics. Both sides were talking about completely different matters, but this didn't prevent them from quickly reaching an agreement after coming into contact. Firstly, the matter of the new barbarian sovereign was far too important. The Western Wasteland great emperor didn't want to see the great war of the past once more. After all, if Huang Zhou could seize this chance to rise up and replace them as the Western Wasteland's ruler, then others could naturally replicate what they had done. For instance, the Yi family. The great emperor had confidence in controlling the situation, so he gave the Yi family a chance to regain their destiny. But he wasn't willing to give them a chance to fight. Secondly, towards the loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin, the Western Wasteland great emperor always had a trace of suspicion in his heart. It was like a thorn buried deep in his flesh. Although it wasn't large, it was always there, making him feel uncomfortable and swollen. Because of the Broken World accident, Li Siji had fallen into madness. Yet, why didn't he blame anyone and instead stubbornly latch onto Ningqin? There was definitely a problem here. Thus, the great emperor pushed the boat with the current. He had Li Ruhua step forward and borrow the strength of the central desolate Li family to confirm things. As for Chen Shangolf, since Li Ruhua wanted him alive, the great emperor didn't mind turning a blind eye. This didn't mean that a father could rely on his son to live. It was unknown what the future held, but the current Chen Shangolf didn't have enough weight. Loyal Marshal Marquis Mansion. Meaty opened her eyes. Her complexion was a bit pale, and there was a hint of weariness in her eyes. She raised a hand and rubbed her sore and swollen eyebrows. Her lips curved up in a cold sneer. "In this world, there is no place that we can't see. At most, the price we have to pay is large or small." However, even though she said this, the secluded pavilion in the imperial palace looked like a common-looking octagonal pavilion. But the truth was that there was a vast universe within. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a reversal array formation. If an ordinary person wanted to spy on the world within the secluded pavilion, they feared that before their divine sense could approach, it would be torn to pieces and burnt to nothing. Even for her, if she wanted to break in and prevent herself from being discovered, it would take a great deal of effort. At this time, the sneer on Meaty's face suddenly froze. Of course, it wasn't because she had exposed herself, but because Meaty had helplessly discovered that in order to help Qin fill in the gaps, she had consciously taken the initiative to do this. But she never imagined that this would be a completely losing transaction. She wouldn't be able to obtain a single copper coin in return. Pa! The finger that was rubbing her eyebrows spread out and fell on her face, covering her face. All that could be heard was the sound of her gnashing teeth. Damn it! Damn it! She had to investigate this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, after a period of time passed, Meaty was worried that she would willingly sell her life for him. That was King terrifying. Chapter 1596. Standing in the corner, the white-robed maid Baiji looked at the lord she worshipped in her heart, a bit of worry in her eyes. Before she could speak, she was interrupted. Put away your curiosity. If you have the time, you might as well worry about just how long you can live. Meaty's complexion darkened. Her tone was nasty. Go, give this thing to Marquis Zhongwu. She paused. Hurry back. Baiji respectfully bowed. Yes, my lord. There was no hint of dissatisfaction in her voice. She received the jade-like object from Meaty's fingertip and hurried away. Marquis Zhongwu, Ning Qin, as she left the courtyard, a cold intent flashed in Baiji's eyes. She had seen the weariness in her lord's eyes just now. Her subsequent bad mood was also because of him. This person really deserved to be killed. Pa! On both sides of the road, several fallen leaves were instantly crushed. Each fragment was stained with a terrifying sword intent. Several maids stopped in the distance. As they looked at the white-robed maid that was brought back to the mansion by the madam, their complexions paled. Baiji didn't even glance at them. She quickly left. When she found Qinyu, he was considering Meaty's plan and the situation he was facing now. The people from the Central Desolate Li family, the dead Wutong County Jr., although all of this seemed reasonable after he understood what was going on, Qinyu's complexion turned dignified. He could confirm that the two little ancestors of the Central Desolate Li family weren't here for the dead Li Sangzhou. Their true goal was him. No, it was more accurate to say that their goal was to find the new Goliath sovereign. Qinyu bitterly smiled. He believed in Meaty's methods. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in such a situation right now. Perhaps the 13th floor of the Central Desolate Divine Continent that was said to be as high as the heavens would have already cut him into 800 pieces. In other words, the reason he was suspected was purely because his luck was bad. He had no idea where he had exposed himself. The Goliath Sovereign Mausoleum, saving the Goliath Totem. Or was it really because of the Wutong County Li family Jr. that was killed, Qin? You couldn't figure it out. But right now, none of this was important. What was important was how he would pass this hurdle. He had been targeted by the Li family. This was a super family that could be ranked in the Central Desolate Divine Continent and was countless times stronger than the Yi family. If he wasn't careful, he might die on the spot before he could even come back to his senses. General, Madam's servant girl is here to see you. Wang Detu limped in and bowed. On the day of the assassination, he had rushed to the front of the 1,000-faced assassin. To be able to keep his little life was already a blessing from the heavens. In his words, in order to protect the general, what was a broken leg? Even if all three were broken, it wouldn't be a problem at all. In short, the act of beating his chest to express his loyalty was done cleanly and cleanly. Qinyu suppressed his thoughts. Let her in. Dressed in white robes, only her eyes were exposed. Baiji walked in from outside. She didn't bow, but stared straight at Qinyu, not hiding the cold intent in her eyes at all. Qinyu's heart chilled. He could feel an intense threat from this white-robed woman, but his expression remained calm. With Ruru guarding the mansion, he didn't worry that someone would impersonate him. Since the white-robed woman in front of him was indeed a maidservant, it was impossible for her to pose a threat to him. But right now, he wasn't in a good mood. Now that he was being stared at by this strange maid with such a cold gaze, his mood could be imagined. What is it? He asked, his voice low and gloomy. Baiji's eyes were cold. She took out something and casually tossed it out. The madam gave this to you. She looked deeply at him and then turned to leave. This so-called Marquis Loyal Marshal was only SOSO. If the two of them fought, she was confident she could cut him down with a single sword strike. Such a person simply wasn't worthy of the Lord. Baiji was disappointed, but in her disappointment, there was also a bit of eagerness. Looking at the back of this unruly maid, Qinyu frowned. He didn't lower himself to her level and instead looked down at the jade-like object in his hand. At this time, it trembled and broke apart, fusing into Qinyu's body. Images appeared in his mind. Although they weren't extremely clear, and the sounds were a bit vague, it was enough for one to understand what was happening in these images. A moment later, Qin Yu opened his eyes. There was a heavy look in his eyes. As he thought, the matter he worried about the most had occurred. The Western Wasteland Great Emperor had always been suspicious of Qin Yu. He had long since discovered this. After all, the probing over and over again, especially after Heaven's Inquisition, was the best evidence. Now the Western Wasteland had joined forces with the Li family. Seeing how confident Li Ruhua was, he knew this trial would be difficult. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. In truth, he had done this many times in the past, and he had been quite successful. But this time it was far too bumpy. Indeed, the higher one's rank was, the harder it was to deceive them. His Majesty in the Imperial Palace would soon make a move. Qin Yu couldn't avoid this, nor could he avoid it. Otherwise, it would only deepen his suspicions. How could he resolve this? He had to scratch his head. Baiji didn't stop. She returned to the rear residence and respectfully bowed. "My lord, the item has been delivered." Midi glanced at her. With a loud bang, Baiji was sent flying away and smashed into the ground. She didn't dare to use her sword, intent to block it. Her complexion paled and blood flowed out from the corners of her lips, dyeing her white robes red. "Do you know why I hate you?" Baiji stood up. "I do not know." Midi coldly sneered. She waved her hand, and with a loud slap, she was sent flying away. "Then get out of here and think about why you were hit. Come back after you've figured it out." "My lord." Baiji looked up. I just think that Marquis Zhongwu isn't worthy of you. Pa." With another slap, she tumbled around several times, both sides of her face swollen. "Worthy or not worthy, you don't have the qualifications to say that. Moreover, don't forget your status. You are nothing more than a lowly maid, and yet you dare to call yourself me. Do you want to die?" Baiji shivered. She was covered by Midi's eyes. At this moment, she could truly feel the aura of death. Fear gushed out from the depths of her heart. She struggled to kneel down, bowing her head to the ground. "I was wrong. My lord, please calm your anger." Midi leaned forward, her eyes icy cold. "Remember, if you dare to harbor any hatred in your heart or do anything that crosses the line, I will personally kill you." She waved her hand, her face full of disgust. "Get out of here." Baiji didn't dare to speak. She respectfully kowtowed and left. "Humph!" Midi coldly sneered. She looked at her back. After this beating, this fool still couldn't see her own position. She really deserved to die. As for the problem of the central, desolate Li family, Midi tapped the table, her expression calm. Contrary to Qin Yu's expectations, the arrangements of the Western, desolate, Great Emperor didn't arrive. Instead, a new storage ring was secretly delivered to his residence. Inside the ring were the materials needed to set up the world-breaking order. The sky-bearing monarch smiled. He patted Qin Yu's shoulder. "Marquis Zhongwu, His Majesty has ordered you to return to the Western Border Army as soon as possible." After Qin Yu's breakthrough and the feedback from the Joss Flames, the sky-bearing monarch felt much more at ease. He felt that this matter was enough to dispel the fear and distrust in His Majesty's heart. And now His Majesty had decisively allowed Marquis Zhongwu to leave the imperial capital and return to the Western Border Army. Without a doubt, this was the best evidence. Qin Yu cupped his hands. "Thank you, sky-bearing monarch." He hesitated for a moment and said, "I will leave the imperial capital. Do I not need to ask for His Majesty's resignation?" The sky-bearing monarch waved his hand. "His Majesty's graciousness has saved you a lot of trouble. This is a courtesy that even the generals in the army can't get. It is enough to show how much His Majesty values you." Qin Yu's face was full of gratitude. He bowed towards the palace and expressed his stance. He almost believed himself. "Marquis Zhongwu, this boy Baiyu will work for you in the future. Please take care of him. I won't send you off. I will take my leave now." The sky-bearing monarch left with a smile. He was in a good mood. As Qin Yu watched his back vanish, the smile on his face slowly faded. He frowned and revealed a solemn expression. As the saying goes, there must be a reason for something abnormal. Qin Yu felt more and more uneasy. He thought for a moment and went straight to the backyard of the mansion. The maids that came and went were still as beautiful as flowers, but many of their faces had already quietly disappeared. As for where they went, Qin Yu wouldn't ask. After all, people had to pay the corresponding price for their own choices. In this aspect, he trusted Meaty's judgment. "Madam, the Marquis is here." Knowing that the two masters of the mansion didn't like others being present when they spoke, the maids bowed and left. The white-robed Baiji was also among them. As she passed by Qin Yu, she paused and lowered her head in greeting. Towards this strange maid, Qin Yu had a deep impression. After all, just a glance from her was enough to make him feel uneasy. It was difficult to forget her. "Who is she? Where did she come from?" Qin Yu directly asked. With Meaty's current state, he didn't need to hide too much. Meaty lightly said, "You brought trouble upon yourself, and yet you come to ask me? Do you want to die?" Qin Yu couldn't understand where her temper came from, but he was already used to Meaty's shooting her mouth off attribute. His thoughts raced, and he furrowed his eyebrows. "This is the person that the great shaman of Meng Mountain asked me to save?" Meaty nodded. "Her name is Baiji. She is now my maid." Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He thought that she was a dignified and tyrannical female sword immortal, but she had actually been forced to become a maid in order to survive. No wonder she was in such a terrible mood. Whenever she saw him, she didn't even give him face. She clearly saw through Qin Yu's thoughts. Meaty coldly sneered, "If you have the courage, you can go ask her why she doesn't like you." There was a hidden meaning in her words. Qin Yu didn't understand. He coughed and changed the topic. "Forget it. None of that is important. It's fine as long as you are willing to save someone." Meaty's eyebrows shot up. "Don't you feel depressed?" Qin Yu had a calm expression. "I don't. I am only helping the great shaman of Meng Mountain. Who he wants me to save and what the person he saves are to me, none of that is important." Meaty looked at him, not speaking. Qin Yu rubbed his nose. "What can I act cool? I shouldn't be able to defeat her, but I agreed to help, so I can only pretend that I don't care. Do I have to be so angry that my face turns red and I have to grit my teeth?" Chapter 1597. Originally, little Meaty was in a good mood as she watched Qin Yu eat. But as she saw him rub his nose, her complexion darkened. "As long as you're here, there's definitely nothing good. Hurry up and tell me." A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. The weather in June really changed at a whim. Everything was fine just now. Moreover, we still haven't settled the grudge from before. You just wait and see. You'll have a chance in the future. So for now, if you can endure it, then endure it. If you can't, then suppress it. Qin Yu told them about the arrival of the sky-bearing king. I felt that something was wrong. How could they let us go just like that? Ro rolled her eyes and coldly laughed. "If you don't want to, you can choose to stay, but I won't be staying." Qin Yu choked. He couldn't provoke him right now, but couldn't he just hide? He got up and left. He wasn't in a very sorry state, but he did look like he was fleeing in a panic. As he left the courtyard, he let out a long sigh. When he had spoken to this person before, Qin Yu had always been the one with an unyielding attitude and had always held the upper hand. But when this person descended into Qin Yu's body, the situation reversed. Qin Yu was pressed down on by the pressure. Even breathing was tiring. Could it be that this was the legendary feeling of hugging someone's thighs? I just can't seem to get hard. For a man to be reduced to such a state, it was simply enviable. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a smug smile. With Xiao Ruru by his side, he wasn't afraid of anything. Who wouldn't be envious of this level of treatment and treatment? Anyone who said no was definitely a stubborn duck. For example, even though he had only just started and was immediately rebuked, the truth was that Qin Yu had already obtained the answer. Little Meaty's attitude itself spoke for itself. She didn't care, which meant that she couldn't pose a threat to them. What was there to hesitate about? Of course, it was time to leave. 2 days later, after a great storm, before the aftershocks had completely dissipated, the third-class Marquis Ningqin obtained the great emperor's permission to return to the Western Border Army. The news came so suddenly that even when the Zhongwu Marquis Manor was empty, the big and small bastards in the deep waters of the imperial capital still hadn't come back to their senses, leaving just like that. But soon after, there was a wave of joy, and some people even cried tears of joy, thinking that the fiend had finally left. Previously, there was a storm of impeachment, and then heaven's inquisition descended. Without giving anyone time to react, he leapt to the high position of Marquis. After just 2 days of peace, the Wudong County's Li family exploded with news of a junior being killed. The entire court was once again paying attention to this matter. Many people were filled with excitement and wanted to rally the war drums. They were waiting for the right time to hit Marquis Zhongwu while he was down. They wanted to let Marquis Zhongwu know that the higher he climbed, the harder he fell. However, before they could do anything, they nearly choked to death. More than half of the Li clan's residents in the imperial capital had been destroyed. In fact, one of the direct descendants of the colossal Li clan of the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture had his cultivation severed by His Majesty. As for Marquis Zhongwu, he smoothly broke through to the next realm, causing the nation's fate to be replenished. The power of incense continued for a long time, and the amount of it was so great that it created an unprecedented record. Because of this, countless important officials of the empire became very jealous overnight. Those who didn't have the time to make a move were fine, but those who jumped out to call for the arrest of the murderer during the incident of the Li family in Wudong County were regretting to the point that their intestines were green. Such a Marquis Zhongwu was, of course, an evil star in the deep waters of the imperial capital. In the eyes of many big and small people, he was an evil star that couldn't be provoked. Now that he was finally gone, they felt relieved just by taking a deep breath. But now what they truly felt relieved was not the big and small people in the deep waters, but the old monster in the residence. He's gone, ha ha ha, he's really gone. He's gone. Ha ha ha, he's really gone. Old Masterman danced with joy. He was so happy that he was about to explode. Although he would definitely suffer a loss this time, to be able to settle the whole matter with such a small price was simply worth it. Butler, Old Masterman stood up and shouted. After a short jog, the butler, who was busy with other matters, rushed over with a head full of sweat. He bowed respectfully. "Old Master, what are your orders?" Old Masterman waved his hand. "Go! Immediately bring the young master back, and then give an order for everyone to pack up their belongings and belongings. We are moving." Ah! The butler's eyes widened, his face full of confusion. Why did they suddenly move out of nowhere? This was an old residence that had been passed down for several generations. Was the old master sick? Old Masterman glared at him. "What are you standing there for?" "I am very clear-headed. Hurry up and give the order. If there is any delay, I will skin you alive." The butler was startled. He hurriedly agreed and hurriedly ran away. They had lived in this residence for thousands of years. Of course, they had feelings for each other, but feelings could be slowly cultivated in a different place. They had finally sent away that madam. If they continued to stay here, wouldn't there be a hole in their brains? Go. They must go. The faster the better. The further the better. Old Masterman could not sit still anymore. He personally went to urge them. Before the sun reached the middle of the sky, the whole family had already disappeared in front of the shocked eyes of the neighbors. When someone asked, they only said that an elder in the family was seriously ill and rushed to visit him. Of course, the Western Wilderness had already noticed this. But before the little eunuch showed up, Old Masterman used the excuse that he was worried about revenge and directly brushed it off. stopping the Min family from leaving the imperial capital. All right, they could only think about it. Unless the Western Wilderness was prepared to rebuild more than half of the imperial capital, they could only remain silent. Of course, from another perspective, the Western Wilderness might be happy to see the Min family move out of the imperial capital. Thus, they remained silent, neither stopping nor expressing their stance. "Daughter, are you done packing?" "Yes, father." The girl with two shiny black braids blinked her eyes in confusion. "But why do we have to move?" The girl suddenly blushed. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito. "Father, do you really want to give me to old Master Min as a concubine? Even if I don't oppose this, he has already left. If we chase after him, we will definitely be laughed at." The boss smiled honestly. He reached out his hand and touched his daughter's hair. "Our daughter is a lucky one. You are very good at judging people." "Don't worry," before Old Master left, he told me. "I know that Old Master is thinking about the breakfast he had in the morning. He has eaten it for dozens of years, so he definitely won't like it if we change places. If we follow him, Old Master will only be happy." The girl was a little confused. "Old Masterman has such a big residence and so many servants. I heard that he has several mountains of gold and silver. What delicious food can't he eat? Why does he have to think about our little stall?" But since her father had spoken, she nodded out of habit. Watching the girl pack up the last bit of food, the boss sat down on a chair and smoked a pot of tobacco. As he puffed out a cloud of smoke, a complex expression crossed his face. "My silly girl, if you could become Old Master Min's concubine, then what would I have to worry about? Even if you died beyond redemption, it would be worth it." After a moment, the father and daughter rode on an ox cart. Without alerting anyone, they slowly left along the street. As for the group of neighbors, they discovered that the breakfast shop hadn't opened the next day. After waiting for a long time, they sent people over to see that the shop had already been cleaned up. The slower ones were still confused, but the faster ones were already cursing out loud. "You old thief! You moved away by yourself. You left, and you even took away the breakfast shop that we have lived in for dozens of years. What do we do now? How immoral!" Capital Region, Transmission Array Area. The Imperial Capital Garrison Division was heavily guarded, but the carriage of the loyal Marshal Marquis Mansion was incomparably smooth. They only did a symbolic inspection before waving their hands to let them pass. But before Qin Yu's carriage could enter the transmission array, it was stopped. "Lord Marquis, this servant has been waiting for you." Eunuch Wei Ming smiled and respectfully bowed. This scene caused the several guards in the transmission array area to be stunned. When they looked at the carriage again, they subconsciously felt a bit more awe. Qin Yu pushed open the door and walked down. He cupped his hands together and said, "Eunuch Wei Ming, is there a decree from His Majesty?" Wei Ming smiled and nodded. "Lord Marquis, guess is correct. His Majesty said that this world is not peaceful. For instance, those assassins from Brilliant Shui Pavilion have yet to lower their heads and admit defeat. Thinking about how there are people in the imperial capital who would dare to assassinate you, he doesn't feel too reassured." He lifted a hand and pointed to a black carriage not too far away. "There are several old people from the palace inside. His Majesty has asked Lord Marquis to bring them along. If there are any accidents, they should be able to help Lord Marquis a little." Qin Yu glanced at the black carriage. Although he couldn't see the people inside, he could feel the faint traces of cold and gloomy aura that he was familiar with. Those 4 old men in the imperial palace. There was no mistake, it was them. 1, 2, 3, for there were actually 4 of them this time. It seemed that the Western Wasteland Great Emperor had treated him with great care. Qin Yu revealed a grateful expression. He bowed towards the imperial palace, repeatedly expressing that he was deeply grateful to the emperor and that he would do his best to serve his Western Wasteland. Wei Ming drew back 2 steps. "This servant has finished his errand. so I won't delay Lord Marquis any longer. I wish you a smooth journey and that you will have more merits in the army. I accept Eunuch Wei Ming's auspicious words. Qin Yu smiled in return. He glanced to the side and then boarded the carriage. True Saint Bai Yu, who was waiting at the side, was already smiling as he walked towards Wei Ming. As a great eunuch of the imperial palace, how could he leave empty-handed? Otherwise, that would be far too rude. Wei Ming declined again and again. In the end, he accepted the worthless border specialty that True Saint Bai Yu spoke of. He lowered his head and peeked at it. Wrinkles appeared on his face as he smiled. Lord Marquis, please take care. This servant will kowtow to you to see you off. As he spoke, he really did respectfully kowtow. For old men, this sort of treatment was far worse than even the princes and princesses of the imperial capital. To be held in such high regard by His Majesty, the future prospects of this Marquis loyal marshal could be imagined. So what if he kowtowed? This was a blessing. The eunuchs of the palace might seem glorious, but in the end they were rootless duckweed. If they wanted to live a peaceful and comfortable life, they had to form good karma. Wei Ming smiled as he watched the procession disappear into the transmission array. Perhaps he didn't know that he had made a ridiculous mistake this time. Perhaps he would have to suffer a little. Little Meaty frowned. She glanced at Qin Yu across from her, her face full of disgust. What are you doing in my carriage? It's not like you don't have a place. Qin Yu smiled. I was bored on the road, so let's have a chat. Hugging someone's thigh was something he did, but it wasn't good to say it out loud. It was far too damaging to his face. Little Meaty humphed. She curled her lips and closed her eyes, as if saying that if she believed even half a word from him, then she would be an idiot. In a corner of the carriage, the white-robed Baiji glanced at Qin Yu. He smiled back. He imitated Little Meaty and closed his eyes, quietly adjusting his breathing. Baiji lowered her head. A cold light flashed deep in her eyes before she immediately composed herself. Chapter 1598. When a military general left the capital to return to the border army, he would be accompanied by his personal guards. There were strict etiquette requirements along the way, so he naturally couldn't casually stop or start. Rather, the Empire's military department determined the route, setting an approximate deadline and also allowing the local authorities to prepare ahead of time to avoid any accidents. Whether it was a coincidence or something else, when Qin Yu left the imperial capital and stepped out of the main city's transmission array, it was still Sigay City. According to the explanation given by the military department, Marquis Zhongwu's personal guards had all been injured in the assassination attempt, so it wasn't appropriate for them to travel long distances. If they repeatedly passed through the transmission array, there was a chance of accidents occurring. The reason was reasonable and ample. After the group arrived at Sigay City, they were allowed to rest for a day. Qin Yu didn't have any objections to this. He was waiting for the Western Wasteland Great Emperor's next move. Since he had decided to join forces with the Li family, he naturally wouldn't remain silent. He originally thought that there would be some problems during the day they stayed in Sigay City, but Qin Yu soon discovered that everyone in Sigay City was in a state of panic. The city was in chaos, and on the way to the relay station, there were even loud explosions, as if someone were fighting. When they entered the relay station, it was also a chaotic scene. It was unknown where the relay station deputy had gone, but luckily a subordinate official stood up. He clenched his teeth and received Marquis Zhongwu's group, placing them in the best courtyard and arranging for people to serve them. In a rush, mistakes were inevitable. But for better or worse, Marquis Zhongwu, who was feared and respected by all the bastards in the imperial capital, didn't end up with no place to hide. The relay station deputy finally rushed over with a pale face. He knelt in front of Qin Yu and repeatedly kowtowed, begging for mercy. As a minor official in the Empire's relay station system, although he had a low status, because of his work he had sharp eyes and ears. He could feel Marquis Zhongwu's prestige far more deeply than anyone else in the city. Moreover, there was something happening in Sigei's city that left him trembling with fear. Who knew whether or not this matter was related to Marquis Zhongwu? Thinking of this, the relay station deputy paled. Qin Yu certainly wasn't in the mood to make things difficult for this relay station deputy. He waved his hand for him to rise. What happened in the city? Someone is actually causing trouble here. The 108 main cities weren't just empty names. Putting aside their own defensive strength, they were one of the nodes of the empire's national destiny. Even peak-level sovereigns would be tired of living if they dared to cause trouble here. The deputy carefully looked at Marquis Zhongwu in front of him, not knowing if there was a deeper meaning behind his words. But he had circled around the gates of hell. At this moment he was surprised. He did not dare to think more, and honestly replying to Marquis' words, "The lord of our Guanhai city." "Bah! I made a slip of the tongue. It is the old man Qin Yuanshan who actually conspired to rebel." Fortunately, he was discovered and reported by Deputy General Su Xin. Now he is stubbornly resisting. Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows, surprise in his eyes. He never imagined that the cause of the abnormalities in Siwatch City today would be this. Qin Yuanshan betrayed them? Even if he thought about it with his knees, he still didn't think this was possible. That city lord would only dare to take such a step if he had lost his mind. Seeing that Marquis Zhongwu was silent, the deputy did not dare to say anything else. He remained silent and thought to himself that the Marquis did not know about the situation. Ugh, I must have been too arrogant. I'm just a small deputy. So where did I get the courage and confidence to try and guess the thoughts of a big shot? Who knew whether or not the Marquis was secretly savoring the aftertaste of avenging his great enmity? He looked at the deputy who was standing respectfully and had an expression that said, "I'm not thinking about anything at all." Qin Yu guessed what the deputy was thinking, and his lips twitched. He thought that this really had nothing to do with him. But today, Qin Yuanshan had rebelled. Moreover, he just happened to arrive at Siwatch City. In addition, there was no secret grudge between the two sides. If he wanted others to believe that Qin Yu had nothing to do with this matter, it would indeed be a bit difficult. Although he didn't care about being the scapegoat, it wasn't a serious matter. After all, with the methods of the Western Wasteland Great Emperor, since he had made his move, Qin Yuanshan would inevitably be beaten into the dust. There was no need to think about him living, and there wouldn't be any serious sequelae. But this matter itself left Qin Yu a bit unhappy. He naturally wouldn't say anything to a mere deputy. He waved his hand and sent him away. It was night. The earth shaking, sounds of fighting could be heard from far away. The sounds were like thunder, accompanied by the light of array formations that pierced through the darkness, covering up the moon and stars that hung high in the sky. No one came to the relay station to ask Marquis Zhongwu for help. Whether it was because they were worried that their merits would be stolen or because of some other reason, Qin Yu was happy to have peace and quiet. He turned a deaf ear to everything. In the latter half of the night, the sounds of fighting gradually dissipated. Just before dawn broke, several weary figures appeared outside the relay station. They reeked of blood and reeked of blood. In Siwatch City, there were 3 other influential figures. One of them was the Marquis Qi, who lived here. Of course, this Marquis wasn't the same as the Marquis Zhongwu. His rank wasn't high enough to be compared to the Marquis Zhongwu. In addition, Deputy General Su Xin was also among them. His severed arm had already healed, but he had a sad expression on his face. He lowered his head and didn't say a word. How could a small relay station deputy have the qualifications to see these big shots in front of him? Now he was so scared that his eyes began to water. He respectfully bowed, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by the Marquis Qi. This person wore a set of shining silver armor and carried a blood-stained broadsword. He loudly said, "Don't speak any nonsense. Hurry up and report to Marquis Zhongwu." Chun Yuanshin's rebellion has been suppressed. I ask the Marquis to go and manage the situation." The relay station deputy nodded repeatedly. As he was pointed at by the broadsword, he nearly lost his soul in fear. With a pale face, he turned and ran, fearing that if he was just a bit slower, he would be mercilessly cut in half by that broadsword. Qin Yu had already noticed the movements outside the relay station. After the relay station deputy arrived, he lightly said, "Go and tell the various lords that I have the Emperor's decree and am only passing through Sea Viewing City. I will leave as soon as the sun rises. Everything can be reported to the imperial capital, and they can deal with it as they see fit." The relay station deputy certainly didn't dare to refute. He could only run back and repeat the Marquis's words. Besides Su Shin, the others all revealed a hint of joy. Before, they didn't come to the relay station to ask for help because they were worried that this great merit of quelling the rebellion would be swallowed up by the Marquis. At that time, they would all become foils. The reason they rushed over now was because the overall situation had been decided. No matter who reported to the imperial capital now, they would have already taken the first merit. In order to avoid being hated by Marquis Zhongwu afterwards, they ran over to ask the Marquis to manage the situation and share some of the merit with him. This was also to form good karma. They didn't think that Marquis Zhongwu wouldn't covet the merit, and since they had already expressed their intentions, they weren't worried that he would settle accounts with them later. Of course, they were happy to swallow the merit alone. They all bowed towards the relay station and said, "Marquis, please rest assured that we will do our best to stabilize the situation in the city." Then they turned their horses and quickly left. From beginning to end, Su Shin remained silent. His eyes were faint as he glanced at the relay station shrouded in the darkness of the night. Before dawn, the world was dark. But after these people left, another person appeared outside the relay station, asking to see Marquis Zhongwu. This person didn't state his identity, and his face was even paler than the relay station deputy's. He looked like a sickly invalid that wouldn't live for long. But the relay station deputy hesitated again and again. In the end, he didn't dare to underestimate this person. He respectfully bowed and asked the Marquis to wait a moment. Then he braced himself and ran back to report. Of course, the reason he dared to do this was because, after several brief encounters, he discovered that this Marquis Zhongwu was far easier to get along with than the rumors said. He didn't have a cruel and murderous nature. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to take such a risk. Qin Yu frowned. He looked away from the darkness. He really didn't think that the one who came would be him. Although he hadn't seen him before, he had been injured by an incense flame artifact, and his sword cultivation had been severed. Just these 2 points were enough to indicate the identity of this person. Wasn't it said that the Central Desolate's 3rd generation disciple Li Go had died from his injuries? He wanted to refuse so that he wouldn't unknowingly get himself into trouble. But before he could speak, Meaty's calm voice sounded out in his mind. "Let him in. This boy is a bit interesting." Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He readily agreed. "Let him in." Soon, a pale-faced Li Gu walked into the small courtyard like a corpse. As he saw Qin Yu sitting in the living room, his first words caused him to feel that he had gone too far. "I didn't come to see you." Qin Yu sneered inwardly. He wanted to retort, "If you didn't come to see me, then fuck off," but in the end he held himself back. "Brat, although your thigh is good, not everyone has the qualifications to hug it. Looking for meaty, humph humph. I think your brain must have been cut off by that sword. Hell has no gates, and yet you insist on forcing your way in." There was the sound of footsteps, and Meaty walked in. She walked to Qin Yu's side and sat down. Then she looked down at Li Ge. Just a single glance caused him to stuffily cough. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and soon soaked through his entire body, as if he were enduring some intense pain. But in his eyes there was pain, and within this pain there was also excitement. With a thud he fell to his knees and said in a hoarse voice, "Please save me." "Aye, Li Gu, I'm willing to pay any price. Meaty's eyebrows rose up. Her lips curved up. You're willing to be a dog? Li Gu lowered his head. I am. Very good. Then from today onwards, you will be called Dog Leftover. Don't ask me what this name means. You don't have the qualifications to know. Li Gu stood up. He took a deep breath and said, Yes, master. As a dog, he naturally had to have a master. He didn't lack this awareness. Meaty pointed at Chinyu. Remember, he can be considered half a master to you. When I am not here, his words are still useful. Li Gu nodded. Ro waved her hand. Go down. You won't die for a while. Just live like this for now. After Li Gu left, little Meaty turned to look at Chinyu. She sneered. Did you see little Chinyu? This was his normal position. Even if he didn't do anything, people would take the initiative to serve him as a dog. In my opinion, Dog Leftover's awareness is much stronger than yours. He's not like you, who likes to do things half-heartedly and can't see his own position clearly. Chin, cupped his hands together. You are mighty and domineering. I admire you greatly. After flattering him, he didn't mention anything else. He couldn't possibly stop people from acting cool, right? What's more, he did have the right to act tough. Little Meaty clenched her teeth. She suppressed her voice and roared. Little Chinyu, you are becoming more and more insolent. You are becoming more and more disrespectful. She seemed to have seen through some disrespectful thoughts that left her annoyed. Chinyu yawned and stood up to leave. I'm tired. See you tomorrow. He turned and left, the soles of his feet smeared with oil. Behind him, Meaty roared. Now I understand, you bastard.